Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 39 of the Rewatch podcast presented by the Terrible Video Gamers Club. I'm your host, Tyler Schatz, wondering why it's so dark out right now. Joining me this fine recording session are one Nick Castillo.
Most heroic thing to do is stare the truth in the face.
One Stephen Howard.
Or this episode is dark and I cannot see it.
One Amanda Howard.
Who, if given a dagger, would know to stick him with a pointy end. Hopefully that's all the knowledge I need.
And last but never ever least, one Gary Delaney.
I'm expecting great things.
This episode is where everything truly turned bad. All good ideas went dark. The show stopped caring about the audience and continued on the story equivalent to the quality of a PBS sci-fi miniseries.
Whoa!
Where
Wow.
did you steal that from on the internet?
Brutal.
Little
I
chat
wrote
GPT there.
Occasionally, Tyler, I can write things.
I don't believe you.
It's spelling that's my problem, not writing.
That's fine. We don't hear the spelling part, so it's okay.
What was the word you used? An equivalent to PBS?
An equivalent to. A story equivalent to.
Well done. Could have said on par, but yeah, equivalent to sounds plagiarized.
As we're all here working on picking our jaws up off the floor after Gary's wonderful intro, we will be discussing Season 8, Episode 3, The Long Night. The Night King and his army have arrived at Winterfell, and the great battle begins. So, before I toss it to anyone else where we really tear this episode apart, because I think we all have some wonderful things to say about this episode, air quotes around the word wonderful, I wanted to start off with something slightly different here first and make everyone say something nice about the episode.
Go fuck yourself, Tyler.
Oh, Tyler, that's wonderful.
It is rude.
I
This is
love
rude
it.
and mean, and I don't like it.
Y'all are so naturally negative.
I am. All right, you go
Who
first,
do you
Nick.
want to go to first, Rotsy?
No, you go first, Nick.
Yeah, bringing on the positive vibes. Right off the bat, I wrote down, I liked the tension in this 10-minute tracking shot. It's just like everybody, so you see where everybody is and how everybody just starts with Sam wringing his hands, trying to figure out what the heck's going to happen. Where am I supposed to be? And you flash from like him walking past all the other troops, Lyanna Mormont shouting orders in the background, you flip over, and then it counts to a different person, Tyrion, and Tyrion's kind of doing the same thing. He just like wanders around the camp and then finally ends up down in the up on the wall and then down in the crypts. And it's this really neat, like, nobody still feels like I know the plan, I know what to do. It's this sense of like we're all screwed. So I thought it was nice to set up some of the tension right off the bat, not just the violence and death to follow, but the tension of the before the battle.
I think that is the worst fucking part of the beginning of it. But the good part is practical fire. I think there was some practical fire in this episode, and that's all the only positive I can give it. There's some practical fire.
You should be practically fired.
Into the sun.
I will stick my head on the chopping block and I will give two positives. The first positive is a scope of the battle. I enjoy the large-scale scope of the battle compared to the battles we have seen. The only other one that I can think of that's quite this far is the Battle of Blackwater, and we get a very small snippet of the Battle of Blackwater. We don't get a very large overview like we do in this show. Does that come back to bite the show? I think it does, but the positive is it is a huge scope of the battle. The second thing is I like the way that they use mystical arts and magic in this one in a way that is kind of, it changes the battlefield. It completely changes the battlefield. I'm specifically talking about the fog that rolls in, I think halfway through or like a third of the way through, and how the Red Lady is able to set people's swords on fires. Again, does she do it on the right weapons? Maybe not. But the fact is that she does use these pretty awesome powers, and when she lights the pitch on fire as well. So I also like how it takes her. It's difficult for her to set it on fire, and you can see the fear in her eyes. She doesn't exactly know how this magic is working, So it's that's what I really like.
I'll slightly have to second part of that. I wrote down that I liked specifically that this battle shows lots of different aspects. Like, there's a million different scenes playing out there. There are, just like a real battle, like there is going to be brief spots lacking like actual action. There's lots of practicalities to deal with. There's lots of chaos. No one knows who's in charge anymore or what's happening to the others. They have no clue what's happening. But I also, in that same vein, liked how they showed the confusion and blindness of like a blizzard and flying in it, crashing into trees, each other, unable to tell up from down. Like, I always feel like, especially in snow-covered movie scenes, that they don't really. It's like the people have never actually been in snow, let alone a blizzard.
That's actually a really good point. Like, for being in the north and having the family lineage that all these people should from the north have like fought in winter or know like how to navigate in winter, they did all seem really blindsided by it. That's actually a really astute point.
Nick, they're all summer children. Like, it's said by old Nan that even Bran is a summer child. So none of them have known a winter.
Oh, my sweet summer child. Beautiful.
Mic drop, Nick.
I do love that as an insult. I use it all the time daily with people whenever they say something naive. I'm like, my sweet summer child.
Or what about
Well
you?
done, Gary.
What is yours?
Mine would be actually they wrap up Theon, the character, I think, somewhat fairly well. Like, he comes back to Winterfell.
I think
He stands by the Stark side. He gives his last breath to save Bran. Now, granted, what he kind of does at the end is kind of dumb, but I think overall, though, like, taking that minor part out, Theon's character arc is kind of wrapped up nicely for the show here. And
that
then
I entirely agree with.
I would echo to a lot of what you guys have said here as well. Like the scenic shots of everything, the battle in the snow is kind of taken a little bit more into like the snow is taken a little bit more into account for the battle and everything like that. Just the scope of the battle itself is kind of something we haven't quite seen like this before in Game of Thrones. Nick?
Just with the comments about the scope too, sorry to jump in on it. When I started this episode, I just right away looked at my slider on my screen. It's a 90-minute episode in one location with battle as the entire premise. So yeah, you have to break it up at some point. There's plenty that I'm sure we'll get into about what we didn't like with the episode, but I thought that, yeah, the scope of it, who was where, establishing scenes, little bits of character back and forth banter, I thought were really interesting how they tried to juxtapose it. Juxtaposition.
Oh, also, random Valerian that I actually had to Google. That's a win.
What?
What was the
What did you
Valyrian?
hear
The Red Woman says, Valal Magulis, all men must die.
Yeah.
Grey Worm
Vala
responds, Vala Dereris, all men must serve.
Daharis.
Vaharis.
That's been mentioned
Anyway.
a couple times.
I'll give that as a random throwaway Valerian that had some meaning.
What's been
Like-
said before in the show, though, Gary.
But as a dumb audience member, like, and you don't actually know the translation in that second,
We
It
can't
would
argue with
be
your
a
dumb
throwaway.
audience member comment there.
okay,
I
so
had to tie
stop
into
then.
that.
Stop. Did all of you, other than me, know
Yes.
exactly what
Yes.
both of those words, all
Yes.
those words
Yes.
were?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Gary. They've said it
It's
so many times.
It's on the coin that Arya has when she goes to Bravos, and she uses it there. It's said multiple times in Bravos, and I think it's actually been used by Grey Worm a couple times since it's Valerian.
Valar Morgulus, Valar Dohaeris. Gary, I
All
did
men must
write
die, all
down
must
something
be
though
served.
about that scene. Like, it did seem like such a strange thing for him to say. Like, she has no connection to Grey Worm. Like, why'd she throw that out there other than just a standard, "Hey, I acknowledge you back."
I had a note on that, and we can jump right in if we want to with it too. But
I feel like if
she
you're
just sees
talking
them
to
all
the-
as
Oh,
What?
sorry. I'll let Nick finish and then I'll Go. Sorry.
I was gonna say she recognizes in that moment, like you said, Amanda, just like, hey, you're standing there watching me ride by. I figured it's because they're all the Unsullied, and since Melisandre comes from that Essos side of the world, she would know the Unsullied all come from that area where they probably learned to speak Old Valyrian. And so the fact that they are literally soldiers serving, I figured it was an appropriate greeting that she threw to them. But I had a tie back to it later on, because then when they're trying to light the trench, Grey Worm is trying to catch his breath and catches Melisandre's eye, and she looks at him. And in that scene, he kind of remusters himself with courage, and it was kind of like, in my mind, an unwritten dialogue callback to that point of all men must die. And he's like, all right, screw it. All men must serve. I'm going to die here anyways. I'm going to go try and light the trench. And then he tries to make a push to go light the trench with the Unsullied who come marching out later. So I kind of saw that was something oddly just thrown out in the beginning, but then when that scene happened later and they're trying to light the trench, I saw the two of them lock eyes, and in my mind, I called it back to that. I had a couple notes actually about how Melisandre may or may not have some foreshadowing super magic knowledge about what the future holds in this episode. So
I sort of thinking about it, maybe it's the fact that as he's Unsullied, she's just communicating to him that, hey, you're probably gonna die. Like, but that's your role in the great battle, is that you must die. And his response is that, by dying, I'm serving the greater good.
absolutely. Maybe it's like a Spanglish thing, where like the only thing that most people know in Spanish is "Donde está la biblioteca," and so that's what she throws out to him, because that's all she knows in High Valyrian as she goes by.
Me amo Tibon, la araña discoteca.
Tango, El Gato,
Yeah, exactly.
and
Donde
Los
está-
Pantalones.
Donde está la bando?
All right.
Congratulations, you've just pushed away our bilingual audience.
We've just activated a sleeper cell somewhere.
Yeah. Disenfranchised our bilingual audience.
There we go.
I got my word.
Oh,
Rail car.
All right.
Rail car.
So, Amanda, do you want to kind of start us off with just talking about this episode? I was going to kind of veer away from Steven for a little bit, because I know he's got probably quite a large discussion to go
Can
on.
I-
He has
can I
thought.
real quick, can I start with one question observation that does not have anything to do with the battle at all?
Sure.
And that's just the overall theme of the and when I say theme, the overall way they create this episode. I want to get everyone's thoughts, because I know everyone has thoughts on the darkness of this episode. Not just this normal darkness that, you know, when you watch a nighttime episode happens. This is, and I know Amanda has specific thoughts on this, it is so difficult to watch during the day. It is almost impossible, and I want to hear everyone's thoughts on that. Gary.
I specifically was thinking about that. This is the episode where they stopped caring about the audience, because this was edited in a very, like, probably a high-tech, like, movie theater level editing studio, with the assumption you're going to watch it in a movie theater where the darkness will be an ambiance. It's the effing Dark Knight. No, people are going to watch this at home with the cheap $200 TVs they bought at Walmart. Like, that's what the viewing audience is. Like, and they just didn't care. Or nobody stopped to think that, like, this is not how everyone wants to experience this show. Like, make a director's cut. Not everyone wants that. Amanda.
I have a bit of an unpopular opinion about this. Like, I was frustrated the first time we ever watched this, and I was like, I can't see, and I thought it was our TV all the time. And I like that they did a night episode, and I figured it was that, and then hearing about it afterwards and how unpopular that part was, realizing that they did it to show how dark and nitty gritty and all that jazz. It is really inconvenient sometimes, but honestly, I kind of like the episode for it. I really do. I kind of wish they'd given a warning or something, like put in a headset or up. Like this specific time when we prepared to watch this episode, I actually watched it twice in preparation for today's podcast, because I watched it the first time with Steven, and I made sure that I didn't hit pause every 2 seconds to take notes, because it annoys him for some reason when I do that. I don't know why or what his problem is. but I fell asleep like 2/3 of the way through. It had been a long day. It wasn't because the episode was boring. It's anything but that. Steven watched the rest of it without me. So I had to rewatch this well, Steven already watched it. He didn't want to watch it with me. So I watched it on my own, like on my computer, and in my room was able to like turn the lights down and like, dude, totally recommend that because it was so nice. I was so into it. I wasn't watching it on on like a tiny TV far away with like light around. It was so much easier. But you had to know to do that. I will concede that. Go ahead, Tyler.
So I will also make a very unpopular opinion, and I will also preface this too by saying like, and this is not to like be high and mighty or anything like that. The TVs that I have watched this on are probably considered very nice TVs by today's standard and stuff like that. Like the original TV I watched on was a very nice LCD LG TV, and the most recent time I watched it on was my OLED LCD TV or LG TV. So very nice TVs. And I will add this though, that like both times watching this, I had no problem with the darkness at all here. Like I could see what I wanted to see as part of this episode. I made sure, I think at most maybe I had a background light on behind me, or there was nothing at all, and I was taking notes by just the color, the brightness of the TV there. But I had no problem at all with the darkness for watching this episode. Nick?
I going into it, I've only seen this episode twice. Once when it first came out, and I heard all the initial feedback about it as well, and then this time. And so knowing it was going to be dark, I bumped up the brightness and the backlight on my TV a little bit for it. It doesn't bother me because it's a choice. I think the writers wanted to go with the realistic and really pull you into it. And so then their choice was, we're going to make it dark because the night would be dark and it's going to be blistery. So you can't really focus and see what's going on. I mean, people are going to spend however many hours rendering a dragon to look as realistic as possible. They're not going to have giant backlights to flood the area to make it, super bright, because the choice is either we make this for consumers, which is truly what it should be, but the way it was directed, because I mean you can write a scene, but the writers don't say set the lights at 80%, whatever. That's all a director's cinematography decision. That's going to be the decision of how they want to shoot that scene. And so they went with what feels the most nitty-gritty realistic, in my opinion, versus what would be easier for people to see. I understand that would make a lot of people angry, but yeah, for me it didn't bother me much because I knew going in this time it would be difficult to see. So I bumped it up a little bit, and I thought I was able to see everything well enough.
Do you, I guess as a whole, do you guys feel like it was designed for a cinema, not designed for a crappy LCD TV?
Yeah, if you have stuff going on in the back, I had, just like Amanda and Steven said, and if you turn the lights off and try to zone out distractions, and like I said, I bumped up the brightness on my TV a little bit, it was easier to digest. It was probably be better if it was a darkened room. I wouldn't watch this episode in the daytime or in the middle of the afternoon.
Also, this is actually, whatever version you watched, I don't know if Tyler watched it on a Blu-ray, it's actually brighter than it was on airing, because I do remember that. They did brighten up the whole episode as a whole the week after it released because there were so many complaints. Tyler?
For qualification too, I watched this on a 4K Blu-ray or 4K HD disc that I bought here just recently.
Look at this bougie man over here with his OLED TV, Blu-ray,
Bougie
DVD.
motherfucker.
I had my
I don't even know what acronyms he's rattling off.
Right.
You guys, the $200 Walmart TV. I raised my hand.
Right, ditto. I mean, ours was a Black Friday special from like 10 years ago, and I do admit being frustrated the first time watching it, but I don't see how it could be made for cinema when this wasn't a movie. Like, this is a show that you watch out. Maybe it's meant for nicer screens, but it does seem to matter, like that they count on you watching the setting in which you watch this. Like, you need to know to close your windows and shut the blinds and stuff.
Also, it originally would have aired at 8 or 9 o'clock at night.
Yeah.
Yes, it did. It aired. When did it air? Was it 10 p.m.?
Sunday.
I want to say.
It's late. I want to say
I
it was
think
late.
I'm hearing though that next time we all need to go to Tyler's place to watch this.
Right?
Yes. It also too.
Although,
some of that
does he have
technology,
comfortable chairs? I think I might need to. I don't know. Might need to bring my own chair.
We can do that.
I would like to point out too that I don't know all of the technology. I'll leave that to you all to decide. But some of that technology wasn't around when this stuff came out 10 some years ago, right? Or wasn't as crisp as it may be now. So we're watching, for whatever it's worth, a lesser format in a nicer version now.
I
What might
believe
be
when this
cleaner
came out,
than
they had
everything.
already they were day and date releasing it to streaming. Tyler, sorry.
Yes, you are right on that. And I will say here too, Gary, for your cinematic point, I don't know if it's this episode specifically, but I do know there was a bunch of comments floating around early on in the season that they were thinking about showing some of the episodes in a cinema on like a big screen.
Oh.
So again, I don't know if this was this episode or if this was just talk to begin with, but that conversation was floating around there. And again, like I said, my first episode, the first time viewing this episode was through streaming as it was airing basically. And again, I had no problem with the contrast darkness of it. But again, I will add a lot of qualifiers to how I watch stuff.
Lower your expectations, Gary. If you are wondering if this needs to be cinema level, then you're probably expecting cinema level. Whereas if you go in just trying to enjoy it, maybe for what it is, even if you think it might not be the best, maybe those expectations won't seem as far fetched.
Don't have
Again,
Tyler's like
200
4K Ultra Blu-ray. I
Again,
do have a
200
very nice sound system, but I did not listen to this on Let's Effing Party surround sound levels because this episode I didn't think deserved that. It wasn't that great.
Hey, just spewing the hate. Gary woke up and
That's all I
chose
got.
violence.
Sorry.
All
We
right.
can go to the next point.
So, that cover your point then, Stephen?
Yes, it
Okay.
does.
So we'll throw it back to you, Amanda, if you want to kick it off talking about the episode from your points of view.
Well, when I first started watching it, like I said, I didn't take notes. One, it drives Steven, that's why I pause every 2 minutes. But also, like, since we knew this was the whole episode was a battle, I wanted to just have the feeling of the battle as it hit me. And there's a lot they do really well with this episode. Like, I like that they take the entire episode for this battle. To be quite honest, considering what a major important battle this is, I actually think it could have gone longer. I think it could have gone to another episode, honestly, because I see you're rolling your eyes, Gary. Because honestly, this was such a pivotal moment we've worked up to for so long. But there's so much good at first. So the second time through, when I was taking all my notes, I noticed all sorts of little things. I did want to ask. I noticed, they've got Daenerys in her little. She's like the only person wearing this white coat. It looks nice on her
She's
and
the
all
Ice
that.
Queen.
Yes, Stephen, she is the Ice Queen. I mean, I thought it was clearly meant to make her stand out or emphasize the difference between her and like the Northerners, but it actually made me kind of wonder. Isn't it weird that none of the Northerners are wearing white or light-colored fur? Like, lots of winter animals are light-colored to blend in. These guys are like fully outfitted. And Steven's ready to say something. Go ahead, Steven.
I think it is a Sorry, let Steven go.
No, go ahead, Gary. Finish your comment.
It was a cinematographic choice because I think if she was in black outfit, she looked too much like Sansa. I think it was a wardrobe choice of how to distinguish her because otherwise she'd just blend in.
I thought it was meant to make her look different from the Northerners. Oh, I'm sorry, Steven. I'll just keep talking. Anyhow, but I did wonder, like, it's kind of strange that the Northerners themselves aren't in light-colored fur. Go ahead, Steven.
All right. So I agree that it's probably a cinematographic choice, but on the idea of people up north just wearing white so much, you're using leather. You're not really using furs. So leathers are going to be probably more tan, more brown. And that's what they're wearing. They're wearing boiled leather as armor. Boiled leather as armor. You don't use furs as armor.
But their little fur coats and their little fur cloaks and stuff. I don't know. It's just it's all black. Like, I remember reading in the first book, when John first goes to the wall, when he first meets Sam, that Sam like was completely outfitted in full armor and had like a cloak, all the winter gear he needed, but none of it was black, so they made him re-outfit.
Oh, interesting.
Think
Maybe
black
it
fur would
was
be a
a
little harder.
lighter. Maybe it was a lighter tan color, but since everybody's like poor poverty because it's like a medieval fantasy setting, it just got darker.
Mm-hmm. Could be. I think that was probably, yeah, I figured it was just to emphasize the difference, but um
Mhm.
God, there was so much in this little thing, or in this little thing, this little episode. Um I did like, we talked about the battle being chaotic a little bit. I did think it was funny when you don't anticipate that one itty bitty little thing, like your signal might not be seen to light the trench. I couldn't decide if they were stupid for not having a backup and realizing something like that could happen, or like it was very realistic for not realizing like a condition could change that they were counting on, and suddenly their plan doesn't work anymore. I kept going back and forth. Probably should have had a backup plan in case you couldn't light it, though. What if she was busy battling something? Go ahead,
I agree.
Steven.
I agree. They should have had a backup plan for that, but I don't think you can. You prepare for the variability when you're in a battle like that. I mean, what is the phrase? All plans. Everyone has a plan until you get punched in the face, and that's kind of what happens here as well. But I agree. They would probably have had at least one backup, maybe two backups, probably three backups to, hey, magic.
I agree with both those comments. They should have had a backup plan, especially with so much writing on this battle and that particular one tactic. I had a comment too about the hard to see signals in the dark, because also I made a note down. Almost every other encounter with the White Walkers or the Night King have been in the daylight. And I thought to myself, well, yeah, it would be kind of hard to see that. Like, you would think, hey, we've had all these other encounters where, up in the north, when they stole the white, Dany was on the frozen lake, the giant battle at Arkholm, or whatever it is. I forget what it's called. Yeah, it's like all these other encounters have been in the daylight, so maybe the thought was that they could have been easier to see if we use torches at night. But yeah, the whole thought of like, what if we're obscured, or if it is a winter setting, like is there, they wouldn't be able to check what the weather's going to be per se, but to know that if the Night King has the power to bring in some sort of fog or frost, they wouldn't be able to see those. So having a backup would have been much better. But I had a comment about that too, that maybe they thought it would have been easier to see because all their other battles have been in the daytime, and they didn't anticipate how terrifying it would be to fight at night.
I wondered. It did make me wonder. Like, there was clearly the rudiments of some kind of plan here. They had a plan for a signal. They had a plan to get the trench lighted, and I wondered, like, at one point, what does Dany say to John right before they take off? I think he said something about the Night King is coming, and she said the dead are here already. And I was trying to decide if that meant he was trying to be like, hey, we're not supposed to go yet, and she's like, there's trouble. I'm gonna do something. And in that case, like maybe she was supposed to sit on that ridge and wait to watch the signal, because I kept thinking, what if she was just looking the wrong way when the signal came? Unless you were supposed to be somewhere you could guarantee to see that. So in that case, I mean, is it brave of her to be like, I'm not going to stand by and watch everyone die, or is it extremely foolish of you had a plan, you're abandoning that? Go ahead, Nick.
So I watched the after the episode little snippet. I actually watched it twice because I wanted to really hear what the intent was on this, and they actually made a comment to that because in the moment, yeah, it seems like they're just talking to each other about the dead are already here, and apparently that was the plan, or that's at least what that throwaway line was meant to be. That they're supposed to wait until the Night King comes out, because he has a line like when Dany leaves after seeing the Dothraki get decimated and the little torches go out. John stops her when she makes a move for her dragon and says the Night King isn't here yet, and she says like the dead are already here, like the dead are already here, like the Night King's here somewhere. I'm gonna go fight to save what's left of my Dothraki and get at my dragon, and that her leaving already sets the plan in motion before it's meant to be. When they kind of show their hand that we've got this powerful thing called dragons, whereas apparently the plan was for them to wait and then light the trench easily with the dragons if it got to that point.
And I actually have that as one of my battle notes here as well, is not committing air support until the critical moment is how I wrote it. And that is, they have an ace in the hole, and they overcommit it. They commit it when it's not needed to be committed. Dany should have been aware that, this was going to be a slaughter. You don't line your troops up outside of walls of a siege and don't get slaughtered. That's not what happens. You've got to expect that to happen. And so my notes on that were, Dany commits too soon, gives away where her dragons are, and after she commits to where those dragons are, that's when you get the giant floosh of the blizzard hitting
The
as
blizzard
well.
wall, yeah.
Because then the Night King knows where the dragons are. He knows where to basically strike. So he flies in at that point. But my thought was, why couldn't they have split the use of the dragons? If you're that concerned about the ground troops that you've already set to die, why don't you choose one dragon for ground support, one for committing when the Night King comes? And I just don't think they thought that through very hard. And I think Dany was very rash in her committing that.
That was, sorry, not to jump in on your turn there, Amanda. That was one of the questions I had about siege tactics was, going in too soon with the air support, but also like just the level of outside perimeter defenses. I feel like they had multiple rows of vanguard troops and the cavalry in front of like the line to protect the castle. Wouldn't you put that out first so that way people trying to get to you have to go through that defense and then you can plow through what's left rather than charging into the unknown first and your retreat is blocked by your own defenses? So that was odd to me, but...
So I do want to ask, do we want to discuss this now? Because I have a 7-point plan on how these defenses did not do well. And this is...
How long are we going to give Steven the table?
You're on point 3 here.
10 minutes? You get 10 minutes?
How long will it take?
Now you need to pull out your wrap it up card, Gary.
I mean,
so I can I can wait to talk until my turn.
Well, I mean, if we want to jump straight into that, I mean, you guys have all been kind of just skirting around the points there of how the castle defense was laid out terribly here. So if we want to just kind of dive headfirst into that, we might as well get there.
Go ahead, Steven. Start us
Okay,
off.
it's 18 after. Let's how long we think we're gonna get on him.
All right.
Here we go.
First things first. This is not the use of cavalry. You don't charge cavalry headlong into an enemy that you don't know where they are. Cavalry is used for skirmishing, flanking, and tracking. And that's what the cavalry should have been doing at this point in time. Cavalry should have been skirting and basically mirroring where these enemies are so that they weren't surprised when they showed up. You didn't have a 30-second window of, hey, everyone get to the walls, they're finally here. No, you have Jebediah Jonlin out there with the fucking horses that rides in and goes, hey, they're 2 days out. We need to get ready now. Gary.
Do you feel like it's playing to the Dothraki's strength because they're pillagers and raiders? They're not strategic people. Their battle plan is let's run in there, let's burn everything to the ground, and then we'll take slaves or whatever when the village is sacked.
Like, the Dothraki aren't in charge. They're taking orders. They're not giving the orders.
I don't know. I do agree it's real stupid, but maybe, defending stupid logic, maybe it's you just use them. Like, horses will not be helpful in the second half of the battle. Once they get inside the walls, the horses aren't worth anything. You might as well just get all the Dothraki out of the way. They fall on their swords. Now we move forward.
Well, counterpoint.
It could have just been a writing choice. They just need to get all the Dothraki out of the story. Like, just take them out of the battle.
Real quick, counterpoint to that. They had the dragons up on a ridge waiting for the battle to happen so that the dragons could come in at the right moment, right? Why couldn't you have had the cavalry in a forest off to the side so when the signal is given, the cavalry comes in and flanks the opposing army? In this case, I mean, you'd have to go for the kill. I mean, you'd have to hope that your guys would get to the Nightwalkers, the actual Nightwalkers, and hit them. But that is also something that you could do. You could use them as an attack force in that way, as a flanking method, but you can't use them in a direct head-on attack.
I accept your point.
Fair enough.
My point is really quick. You said flanking, and immediately I didn't think of this while watching it, but when you said flanking, I thought to myself of the Lord of the Rings, to the king! And they charge over the hill downwards in two towers, and they just plow through the troops laterally. That would be I agree, that would have been a much more better use of their troops, because then you hit the troops that are already engaged from the front from another angle. They're not prepared with pikes or whatever else to go fight that way. And you could probably plow through a bunch of them rather than push them back into their own forces. You're not going to get that much forward momentum versus sideways where they're not, standing guard for it. So interesting. Sorry, continue.
Nope, I entirely agree with you. So that's I think the cavalry is horribly and criminally misused here. The next one is, why are your troops stationed at this outside of the siege walls? And I think that's what we were just talking about. You're going to be outnumbered. I mean, the army of the dead is, you've talked about it so many times, is massive. Why are you going to put yourself in an open plain where they have the advantage of being able to swarm around you instead of, and put their best advantage at sight, and their best advantage is numbers when they can come to play. So you are putting yourself in a disadvantage there, and not just a disadvantage. Like I've mentioned, if Dany really wanted her troops stationed out there, she's stationing them there to die. That's you don't station troops outside of walls unless you're stationing them there to die. That's just how it works. Nick.
Really quick, I had a couple comments specifically on this, light the trench theory. Would it have been at all out of play if they had, maybe it's a time constraint thing, but if they had made multiple trenches? Because again, if you can plow through one trench, that's one thing. But if you can plow through a trench and you have all of maybe 20 yards before there's another trench, you really can't gain the momentum to make another strong push. And so I thought to myself a couple times, have your troops, like you're saying, hide behind the first layer, so at least there's some buffer between you and that. I paused a couple times when you see that first aerial shot where all the dead come running out of the darkness right towards the front of the castle. And yeah, it's just they're there for the slaughter. There's no protection, there's nothing, and they can just get swarmed. If there's at least some buffer or, pikes and a phalanx pointing forward, you get some deterrent at least to slow their progression. But yeah. Go on.
Also, did anyone else, probably Sir Stephen caught it, that they lit their sharp, pointy sticks on fire, and that it inevitably made them less valuable because you just made your pointy sticks now brittle and broken, so now they can just walk over. Like, the dead can walk over fire. The pointy sticks are more valuable. I'm sure there's a name for them. At this point,
that's fine. I will say one last thing on this troops being stationed outside, though. No, caltrops are much smaller. One last thing on the troops being stationed outside the wall. If you do need to retreat your troops when they're stationed out the wall, the only entrance they have back inside the walls is through a small gate, which is going to cause a crush. And you are going to lose tons of men. And we see this happen in this episode when they try to retreat, and the Unsullied basically have to take one for the team. And all end up dying so that the Northerners can get back inside their walls because they were stationed outside of it. Next point is exactly like both of you were saying, earthworks prep. And this is what Nick was talking about, is something called defense in depth. And that is multiple lines of defense so that if one's overwhelmed, you run into a second one. And what we see in front of Winterfell, there are no major earthworks, there are no major barricades, there are no pitch traps, there are no trenches, there's no moat of some kind. They know they can't travel through water. Dig a goddamn moat. You have a couple months, do it.
Wouldn't Winterfell have a standing moat or be built in such a way that it's defendable?
I think
Tyler?
in the books they mentioned there was a moat in Winterfell, and I don't know if Winterfell is designed in a way where there's the bigger outer wall and then there's an inner wall as well within Winterfell. I think that was mentioned in the books, not quite shown in the show.
Nick,
Yeah,
if
I
you
can't
show us a
remember.
picture, we're not going to be able to see it. Amanda, sorry.
No, I can't remember. I feel like I remember moat. I'm not sure about an inner and outer wall. I know Winterfell is very old, and there's several special things about it. Like they didn't level the ground before it was built. Um, and there's lots of little secrets about it, which I suppose is the case with any of the major castles and keeps. I do like how I always liked the design of Winterfell from a distance when they show like the big round towers. It's very unique for visual,
Mhm.
but you're right. I feel at the very minimum, I feel like it had to have a moat or an inner and outer wall because this literally been attacked before.
And I mean, even getting outside of the walls again, what just to give the viewer kind of an idea of what they could have done. If you know you're going to position your army outside of the wall and you're going to build some defensive works outside of the wall, build trenches where they can maybe hide a little bit from the enemy as they come through, or small little walls that the enemies have to surmount where you can stab down at them as they come through, or build massive like what Gary was talking about, those wooden stakes with obsidian on them. Build them in large clusters to basically funnel the enemies around into killing zones. Make it so that you can't just have a massive single charge coming at you and just go, well, this is what they're going to do, so we better prepare for it. You should do something about it.
Quick question. I can't remember. Do the whites, the regular White Walkers, do they explode as well, or is it just the others when they get hit? The obsidian.
Just the others?
I think it's just the White Walkers are the ones who explode when they get hit with obsidian or
Okay.
Valyrian steel. The whites just kind of shatter, I think, basically.
Gotcha.
Which they're not supposed to in the book, too. They're like, you can only use the obsidian and the Valyrian steel and the others.
Just something you were all talking about right there about the obsidian tip spikes. I think they're able to get through the fire trench because they just like lay down dead and make a path for them to walk across. If they exploded when they got touched, there'd still be fire and still nothing that would, cause the fire to be smoldered. So I was just thinking like, oh, that would make a lot of sense actually. But I couldn't remember who exploded. Sorry, I interrupted.
So Stephen mentioned that the Unsullied are dead, or mostly that force is mostly destroyed, and the Dothraki are mostly destroyed. That will be a point in future episodes of how many Dothraki and how many Unsullied survive. It's worth noting, and definitely not something you would catch on your first watch as a dumb viewer like I am.
Well,
Going so hard on yourself, Mary.
Going forward on this, one of the things we also see outside of the walls for some godforsaken reason are siege weapons.
Trebuchets!
They have trebuchets and catapults. Probably everything they could have accumulated in the north outside of the walls. Those things have a arc to them, which will go over walls, because that's why they're siege weapons. Put them inside the fucking walls. I don't know what to tell you. That is my comment on that. That is my entire comment on that, is put them in the walls. My God.
We agree. Move forward.
Yes.
Look, Gary, I think you just agreed with Steven like 3 times.
I don't need to disagree with him and make this take any longer. Nothing is really truly defendable about this. Like, it's not like a character flaw. It's just like, yeah, I can see that. That's a bad idea. Cool.
My next point here is, why are the walls not already fully manned when they retreat through the walls? Everyone screams, get to the walls, get to the walls. And I'm sitting here going, why are you not at the walls already? What do you think's happening right now? Like, it boggles my mind. And we see on the walls that they do have, the walls are studded with obsidian. In every once in a while sort of a location, they're not fully studded with obsidian. Why don't you fully stud your walls with obsidian? There shouldn't be an issue here. And my big thing here is, you're in a siege. Your main defensive component here is your walls. Nothing else matters. If you lose the walls, you've lost the siege. And by not just having everyone on the walls already, you are setting yourselves up for failure. Gary.
Is Winterfell built into a hill or in such a way that only has one avenue of approach? Because that's the other thing that's very... I already rolled my eyes at Nick for making a Lord of the Rings reference, but I'm gonna throw another one, which is Helm's Deep, which there's only one side of the wall that's attackable, and that's very much how I feel like this battle is. I don't really, dumb viewer, don't really feel like I fully understand how the battle takes place on a grand scale of landscape, because as soon as it could have a grand scale of landscape, we go into cloudy mode and Transformers mode, and I lose all perspective as to what's anywhere.
So I believe the way Winterfell is kind of laid out in the show and even in the books here is it's kind of, imagine a castle out in an open area here that's, you can get at it from all sides there. The problem, I think, with the show, though, is they show it them attacking essentially from the north going south, hitting just that one area. The dead never really kind of surround the castle itself. It's always just shown as them kind of attacking and charging up the walls on one side of the castle there, because they also then have Bran hiding in the Godswood, which is on the other side of the castle there.
Yeah, I was wondering about that during this episode. I didn't think to write it down, but like, at least judging from the intros where you get the cool little how it builds itself up or whatever, the Godswood looks like the wall surrounding most of it is not. There's nothing on their side. Like, Night King could have gone around and over the wall and been right there. It was like for some reason he had to like take the hardest way possible through the soldiers through the castle.
Yeah, I very much got that sense too, that maybe the Godswood is inside the outer perimeter wall, but not inside the keep itself. Like it's a forest that's adjacent and guarded because it does have some religious value to the people of the north that they defend it. But yes, it did not seem well guarded.
Two notes on the which way the White Walkers came from. First note, if they'd used the cavalry correctly, they would have known anyways, because they would have been, following the enemy forces. So that's neither here nor there. Second, I think you could tell, and you could very, very well estimate that based on what the Night King has done so far, he has very, very little regard for humans, and he prefers to go directly through them. He didn't go around the wall. He went through the wall. He's not going to go around to flank Winterfell. He is going to go through Winterfell because he disdains humans. He discounts them. There's no real way to...
Steven, I don't like this. It sounds like you're almost defending the poor writing here by saying that that's how it was the intent of the villain to be as destructive as possible and as unilateral in thinking as possible.
Well, also too from the Night King's perspective there of like he's literally just rolled over everything as he's going south in one direction there. So the vast army that he keeps accumulating is just basically his weapons, or he just keeps throwing essentially bodies at the problem.
It's true. My 0.6 here is no longer a point because it was taken. That is my air support. And it, as I said, it is do not commit air support until the critical moment. I understand that you don't have any reserves here. You are facing a much larger army, so I'm not going to go into that. My very last point is they know that, and this happens towards the end of the show. I'm actually surprised the Night King waits this long to do it, but the Night King can raise the dead. You need to do this siege and have it sounds almost pedantic, but you need to have as little casualties as possible because he can bring your casualties back to life. You need to find a way to deal with your casualties as they happen, maybe set the bodies on fire. It's going to be sad, but set the bodies on fire, something like that. And the stationing of the troops stationing of so many of their forces outside of the walls, absolutely zero regard for how many people are going to die, just taking it. And like what you said, Valor Morghulis, yeah, you're all going to die. Well, if you die, you're going to be brought back to life. So you're not all, men all don't die here. You need to think better about this. And that is a massive strategic error that they make that doesn't actually come back to bite them all that badly. I'll be very honest. But that is my final point, because at that point, the White Walkers are over the walls, and once they are over the walls, the siege is effectively over. It is no longer a grand battle. There are a bunch of small little fights between characters. So I believe that at that point, that's when the battle ends, and that's when just the fight to survive begins. Nick.
I agree with all that. Fantastic breakdown. Thank you, Stephen. I'm just looking at maps in my book, The History of the World of Ice and Fire, that George R. R. Martin was a reference on. So not that this is gospel, but I'm sure that like the general layout of where everything is. Yeah, Winterfell is essentially in a wide open flat area. It's got a little bit of forest nearby, which is probably the forest where the general White Walkers, the others, were coming out of on horseback. But for the most part, it's a wide open, easily accessible area that's right alongside the King's Road. So I would imagine it was just that was the general direction the walkers were coming south from Last Hearth from, heading towards. And so yeah, everything that Jon would know, well, Jon, Tormund, several of those people who have already interacted with the dead would know, he's probably going to come from this direction. He's going to try and drive right through us. He's not going to come this way. There's this scene where they light the trench, and you see the trench goes literally all the way around the castle. Yeah, if he's not going to go that way, focus to the front and have two wide swaths of trenches just on that one direction. You don't need to fortify the back. But choices were made. Maybe not the best choices, but yeah.
Were choices made, or did they just sleepwalk into this battle? Because I felt like they slept walk into it.
You're too busy having sex and drinking by the fire last episode to do any major planning.
I'm glad you said by the fire, because I have an excellent point on that later, Gary. Please remind me later about drinks by the fire. Go ahead, Ted.
I will not remind you later.
So 2 points that I had thought of, two kind of branching off two different things that you had talked about, Stephen, here, of nobody being up on the wall, which means they also have no archery or arrows basically being fired on the enemy pretty much at all for like a good chunk of the battle there. When they've spent all this time basically building all of these obsidian tipped arrows. And then the other part was, so we know that the Night King raises the army of the dead. He raises the recently slaughtered to join his army. Why the hell is the safest place then to hide the men or the women and children in the fucking crypts?
Because you need to have a horror movie.
we know an enemy's coming to attack us that can raise the dead. Quick, let's hide all the ones who can't fight in the area where the dead is buried already.
I will say that part was very scary the first time I read it, and when like the realization, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is a horror movie, this is awful. Like, it was terrifying. Though I do have to ask, why on earth can all these the dead, like, why are they so strong that they can punch out stone with their bare skeletal hands? Like, if they
brittle.
Yeah, like, I mean, if they can just pull down stone, why can't they just pull the walls of Winterfell down, or like skip right to the Godswood? Like,
good question.
I've never understood. We obviously we don't understand all the dead, and like in this episode, they almost seem like World War Z, where like they just tumble on top of each other and they're super fast, which is not the case when in the very beginning of the series, and we don't know the practicalities of like what they do. But I mean, they definitely are limited a little bit by their own faculties. Obviously, they can't swim, so why can they punch through stone? Like, why are they earthbenders?
Solid observation.
Go ahead, Tyler.
So you're saying much like Dragon's Fire, their powers grow or decrease as the show needs it to?
Ooh,
it seems like it, doesn't it?
Gary?
Conspiracy theory number 1.
Oh, God.
As the Night King has gotten more convertees to his army, they're more fresh, muscular people and maybe muscular, fresh dead are stronger than the previous long-term dead that that they had north of the wall.
So why were the long-term dead able to break out of the rock sarcophaguses they were in?
Sarcophagi, Stephen.
Sarcophagi. I'm sorry.
Because they are well-preserved Starks.
I know a guy
Yeah.
who coughed once.
And think
I
about,
feel like if you really want to jump the shark, you have bring back Eddard Stark for this episode and have him be one of the people harassing the
again,
crypts.
talk about your ancestors coming for you. Poor Sansa. Like, all these people fled to Winterfell for safety. How do you know that the ghosts of the Starks of the past are coming for you now?
Right. So it wouldn't be Eddard because they returned, like, his head was decapitated. It was like his bones. So, like, can they come back together like Mario Brother Koopas if they're destroyed? Or once they're, like, decapitated and then they're revived, they can't come back together? We've seen some White Walkers walking around without, like,
Nick,
limbs
the word you're
or
looking
heads.
for is dry bones.
Right.
Tyler.
There you go. There you go. Oh, but also too, when the one first ancestry zombie pops out of the crypt, it had long hair and it seemed kind of brown, and I wondered, was that Lyanna?
Ooh.
I wrote down as like, ooh, the first zombie who's like brought back to life. Like, oh, that's right, this happens in this episode. Like they're in the crypt, and the one who comes out, I was like, okay, so like where are they? And I was trying to think, like, I think they're in that middle area ish where you see Lyanna next to everybody else because they're just kind of in the middle of the hallway there. And the first one who pops out is where Gilly is. Gilly sees her first, and clearly it's like a zombie with like long brown hair. It doesn't look masculine. And the scream seems kind of higher pitched, and I thought, ooh, like a female queen. And I thought, would that be Cat? No, because Cat's body was tossed in the river run. And I thought, who else female would be buried down there? Obviously, all of them. But Lyanna's very clearly got a memorial down there. So maybe it's Lyanna Stark?
Okay, here's a bonus question on the rewatch as a generality. Did anyone... I completely forgot that happened. Like, there's a lot of boring battle shit that I knew happened, and I knew how the episode ended, and I knew way too many people survive, but I completely forgot about the crypt part of the episode. Did anyone else have that experience, or did you all kind of know that was coming?
No, we did.
I remembered it was coming.
But hearing Nick describe
remember
what
it was-
sounds like a conspiracy theory when I'm expecting Gary's voice for conspiracy theories was different. Nick, it is a really good point, and I don't like it. I don't know why it's so much creepier to think about Lyanna Stark rather than, like, I don't know. We could have like the king in the north who knelt or whatever it was, and yet for some
Orin
reason
Stark,
Lyanna
right.
Stark coming after them is so much creepier to me.
Gary, I'll be on your side. I didn't remember it was happening until the second you start hearing scratches in the coffins. I was like, oh crap, that's right. Because, yeah, I mean, he can raise everybody. I also had a quick question on that. Do we think it's a proximity thing? Or can, like, he just be like, all bodies in a 2-mile radius awake?
Gotta be proximity.
Do you think he would have...
Proximity.
Because do you think he would have led with it?
It's gotta be
Or
proximity.
do you think he's like...
Proximity
with,
with
like, oh, by the way, your sister and the crypts are screwed. Crypts! And, like, he can control where they come.
I think it's proximity with a 24-hour cooldown.
I was going to say
You
it's
got
like
natural...
like a necromancer in Diablo 2. The dead people have to be on your visible screen before you can raise them.
Originally, I
He
thought
raised his hand
they
and
had to
clicked-
die from like either the other dead or from the others. But I mean,
right.
at one point when I'm blanking on her name, Egret, when John first meets Egret and they kill the others, and she's like, you should burn their bodies, and that wasn't killed by them. So maybe it is just any
Right.
dead.
That seems like
Well,
the
it would have to
Walking
be,
Dead
because none of
conspiracy of whether or not we're all infected.
Mm.
Yeah, it would have to be, because none of the Stark ancestry were killed by walkers.
Or were they? Conspiracy theory.
Dun-dun-dun. Yeah. He raised his hand, so clearly there's a somatic component, but he didn't actually have any material or verbal thing he said, so maybe it's like a lower level spell for him.
I did like a little bit how they did that. They didn't quite do it the same, but like John was at Hardhome. He knows exactly what's about to happen. Like how much more chilling is that to know?
Right.
I thought they did that well. It was like John knows exactly what's about to happen. He immediately picks up and is like, "Oh, gotta go," and he still doesn't
He
make
starts
it.
trying to run for him. I
That
thought
was
that too.
cool.
It seemed almost like he forgot that was something he could do until he got like, oh shit, that's right.
I mean-
he's raising his hands and he starts like trying to run to him.
I mean, dude's been having an aerial battle the entire time. I could understand him forgetting in the moment that, oh fuck, not only can he throw spears and ride a dragon, he can raise the goddamn dead.
It might take
Well,
some
sorry.
focus. I think it probably drains his mana bar. So I think he can't be flying a dragon at the same time. I think he needs some cooldown, refill the mana bar, and then he can do it.
6 second rounds. 6 second rounds. That's all he can do. He doesn't have the double move feat.
He has to
Do
take
we-
like a potion quick.
Exactly. He's got to go eat a cheese wheel to regain some health quick.
Yeah, he's
Do
got to
we
eat like
think-
5 of them in a row.
Do we think it would have been more terrifying, sidebar random question, if we learned the Night King had this power here rather than observing it at Hardhome?
No.
Like we see it and we're
I-
all like, that's terrifying because that's right, he can do that. Or how terrifying would it be if he just like, oh, by the way, you're screwed.
I think it's more terrifying here because then it comes back to so like we as the audience know what is happening now, and then we also realize, oh crap, everyone that has just died here that was on their side is now going to be fighting against them here.
I guess I can probably agree with that. Like oh sorry, Amanda.
Are you kidding me right now?
Honestly, maybe it's a good point that they did it. Like the Hardhome part was just, it was so badass. It was wonderful. And honestly, considering we all know this could happen, I didn't consider it until the first time I was watching this episode too, until I watched him do that, and I was like, oh crap, so many people just died. Yeah, it did not occur to me. Nick, did you have anything to say?
No, but I did, Amanda. But I did. Anyways. No, I think that I did appreciate that he had this ability before coming into the battle, and I think it makes it a lot better knowing that he comes into battle, because I think it was terrifying the way they used it at Hardhome. That was actually scary. If they had just used it here, it would have been like a Deus Ex Machina sort of thing that I don't think I would have respected. Like, I can respect not knowing how this blizzard comes out of anywhere, because sure, why not? But if you're going to use this superpower, I want to have some sort of notice as to why it's coming, because if it didn't, I would just assume it was a screenwriter's throwing a big fuck you, or I shouldn't cuss as much, throwing a big middle finger at the audience.
Do you also feel that maybe it's a creation of scale? Like, it's the understanding that there's a crap load of newly zombified whites on the screen, but there's more that you haven't even seen that makes a larger scale of just how many, like, more, like, this huge army that is so vast and the enemy is within the walls.
I think your second point there, Gary, of now the enemy is further within the walls really touches on for this too, because like it's when I was watching that, it didn't even hit me until like stuff started punching out of the crypts, basically down where Sansa and Tyrion were. Like, oh yeah, those things are probably being revived because the Night King just revived everyone else out on the battlefield. So it kind of like served two purposes there, of making it like more of a horror element down in the crypts there, and then also too just the sheer terror then that everyone has as we're watching it with John there happen, of like, oh yeah, that's right, he can do that. John, you're in trouble. Run.
That's fair. I can get behind all that. I was just thinking in my head, like, would that have been better used, or that we knew it was coming and we know with the gravitas of what was going to happen? Also, side note, R.I.P. Dolores, Ed, and Lyanna, and the Dothraki leader guy, who are all blue-eyed, came back.
I will say right now, unpopular opinion, the way those two died, Ed and Lyanna, sucked, because it was Lyanna,
Who's Lyanna?
the little girl.
A little short
Little
Mormont girl.
Lyanna Mormont. Okay.
Lyanna should have been crushed to death and died, and that's what should have happened. She shouldn't have gotten to stab the giant in the face because the giant wanted to bring her close to her face just so that she could stab him. It was stupid. And
It looked
Ed
like
should,
the giant to me was gonna like bite her, eat her, because it looked like for a moment it was on the giant's mouth, like
it was like,
But that's why he would bring her close.
but why would the White Walkers want to be intimidating or scary to people they're already killing? They haven't done that before. They just kill them, and so it was for the audience, and so that Lyanna could get her one last shot. But then also Ed dying, saving Sam, and I'm going to say this several times in this episode. Sam should have died. Should have died right there. And I would have actually respected this episode more if Ed had survived and they killed Sam. And it's a B character that survives and the A character dies. That would have been better.
I think this is a perfect opportunity for me to go into my conspiracy theory.
Oh, God.
Good actor versus bad actor. The dyers of this episode, Ed, Night's Watch, good actor. A fuckload of Unsullied, bad acting, bad characters, poorly written. Lyanna Mormont, good actor, well-written character. Beric Dondarrion, good in general, but he died with a hold the door moment, which I think definitely detracted from his death. Theon, kind of episode to episode, whether he's good or bad or good or well-written character. And then Jorah Mormont, I thought, was another good actor. Other than the Unsullied, only good written characters died this episode. As you said, Sam survived. Sam is one of the most poorly written characters in this entire show. And he is a survivor. I mean, that's all I gotta say. I kept record. I literally, as soon as people started dying, I was like, I'm gonna keep a record of this. And then when I see the finished results, I was like, I still have not been disproven that only good well-written characters get killed. Nick.
But your good well-written characters is a subjective line. So you can't say what is good or well-written character.
Nick, go through the list. Your opinions. Ed, Night's Watch.
Okay,
character.
I will. Let me talk. You said Beric Dondarrion's death of Hold the Door was detracted from how great he died? Is that what you said?
I thought he was a well-written character. I thought his death... I just rewatched it like right before we started, and he's like holding his hands across like a 4-foot doorway and like holding people back. Like that obviously like any good small child could like just sweep around his outstretched arms as he's in a T pose. Like,
but they're stabbing him to make sure he goes down too. If he's still resisting, the walker might have, again, subjective. I'm willing to admit on my own points too. The walker is still maybe trying to fight or slay the life, quote unquote, left in this particular individual rather than just skirt around and go to the next person. I thought Beric's death was very meaningful. Again, I've only seen this episode twice. Once just taking it in as it washed over the first time, but this time trying to dissect it specifically for this review. And we'll get to the final climax of how the Night King dies. But I had a note here specifically. Beric had been brought back. What is it, like 20-some times? Because this was the moment, the penultimate moment for his character arc, where he needed to be alive to sacrifice himself so Arya could keep living. Because as we see at the end of this, the
does Arya?
I don't agree with it. I will be the first to say I don't agree with it. But the way it's written, right, wrong, otherwise, I'm not getting into that right now. The way it's written, she's the one that has to survive to do the deed. And so the Lord of Light brings Beric back, or allows Beric to come back several times, because this is the moment where his sacrifice, in the context of how it's written, is that he has to be alive for this moment. So him doing that sacrificial hold the door is a crappy kind of way for him to die, since he seems like such a great character, and like you said, well written, but it had a purpose as far as what they were trying to do. Right.
I feel like his death was not as meaningful as the fact that he had to shout at the butt face.
Hound.
the Hound several times. That was literally most of his dialogue in the episode. It was like, Hound, you need to get up. We're all gonna die. You need to get up. We're all gonna die.
But they've always bantered back and forth. So they do have a relationship of sorts.
I also noted under the Hound that his only real like motivation to keep living was Arya. Like it felt like there was maybe a whisper of what could have been a good believable like motivation for him, but I just don't feel like it was well put together. Tyler?
So my question is going to kind of veer off a point here of, I need this answered here first. Does Beric still make it into the room with Arya and Sandor?
Yes.
So then his death.
He's all but dead. He's all but dead at that time. But yes.
Yep. So really, then, like, to push back against your point here a bit, Nick? Though, like, his death ultimately doesn't really serve a purpose because they still all make it into the room anyways together. It would have been, I think, better had he died out of the room there, basically. Like, he held the area and died outside of the room. Like, had they made a bigger show of it, of like him basically bracing himself in that doorway, kept stuff from hitting the door, and like Arya and the Hound make it in. But basically it's then like he stands in the doorway, takes a bunch of knife stabs, and still makes it into the room.
I believe Arya and the Hound get in and like hold the door to the because they're in the main like reception area there, like holding the door, and then like finally have just enough to like creak the door a tiny bit so that he can run forward, because he is still right there holding off the hordes behind him. So then he can like stumble forward and try and get in after they've gotten in and prepped to barricade the door.
And this might be, sorry, Steven,
I get
keep
it.
jumping in front of you. This just might be like a minor nitpick point here of just like the way the death is shown in the show, it doesn't serve the grandiose purpose that that you're trying to describe. I'm not saying like you're wrong in your thought there. It's just like the way his death comes across there is it's not like that grandiose, because he still ultimately makes it into the room. Had he died out in the hallway and like a swarm of bodies just stabbing him over and over and everything like that, that probably would have been a better shot for his death than Steven.
I also think that if he had basically pulled a Theomir, right? Or this Theomir, where he's fighting the orcs and he gets stabbed, but he keeps getting up. He gets shot again. He keeps getting up. He gets shot again. Like,
Boromir?
Show us Boromir. Thank you.
Boromir.
I was doing his brother.
I knew who you were talking about. I knew it was a Lord of the Rings reference, and I just gave up on you. Continue.
Okay, fair enough. But if he had pulled a Boromir and basically had a heroic stand on the way down and not just held them, I think that would have also done better. I get the idea of just hold the door, but I think it would have been better if he'd gone down fighting, personally. But I think that's pulling at straws almost.
But Gary, I'm so sorry. Before you say something, I do have to point out the irony of Steven forgetting the name Boromir when the actor who played Boromir was literally Ned Stark.
Yeah, he died in both, so I don't remember.
You combined Theoden and Faramir and came up with Faramir and butchered Boromir. I'm over it. I'm moving on to Gary.
I figured out how his death could have been better, and that is a White Walker reaches around, stabs him in the belly, and says, "The Night King sends his regards."
I laughed, Gary. I thought it was funny.
Thank you.
Very, very good points. I'll concede that would have been better deaths. Also, too, like the hold the door thing at the end was after he was like fighting and got disarmed and had no other thing to do but use his body, because he's chasing them through the halls too with Clegane and with the Hound and with Arya, fighting with his flaming sword too. It's just that was the last move he had left. That's at least the notes and the perception I took away from it. Oh, just like just different points of view.
Okay, I really have no idea who's been asking questions here.
I think we're on Amanda. I don't know if we've gone to somebody other than Amanda, have we?
Been mansplaining this whole time. You gave it to Amanda, and we just stole the spotlight.
It's just hard to like pick a spot here with this episode. There's a lot going on. How about I pass it off to somebody else and we'll see. I have lots more notes, but I'm sure you guys have plenty of things.
Can I interrupt all of our negative talk to talk about, like, the one bright point I'd mentioned at the start of the episode of Theon's death there? Wanted to kind of shine a little bit of a light on that one of his character
Good
arc
bright point.
redemption there. And I thought it was a very touching part of Bran to turn to Theon there and say, "You're a good man. Thank you."
Mhm. It was amazing.
Gary, you obviously, though, look like you don't agree with our part of touching character.
I had
tribute.
two Theon
Gary's
points, and
just
one is
choosing violence.
one is that earlier in the episode, Bran confirms that Theon's true home is Winterfell. Like that was the place the true place he felt at home. He didn't feel at home on the sea or on the Iron Islands. He felt at home in Winterfell. And yes, I did note that is the ending of Theon, you're a good man, kind of pandering to the audience that, like, you know, a poorly written character, like, this is how we're gonna bookend it, so that if you look back, he was good, and he was good in the beginning, he's good in the end, he'd gone off his path, and he came back, and he's saved at the end. Like, I just didn't buy it. Steven.
So, first of all, Theon's not a poorly written character. There are many poorly written characters in this show. Theon is not one of them.
I'll take that back. He's not a poorly written character. He just...
but
he's had some bad episodes and some bad arcs.
I mean, that's kind of the point of Theon, and I think we've talked about this before as well. That's the horror that he goes through, and him being this cocky little, you know, son of a something, to basically being tortured, having his literal dick cut off, becoming Reek.
You censor yourself, and then you chose to say dick.
Dick's not a cuss word.
Dick's not a swear word.
But then coming back, I think he had a lot of arcs, and I think that this is something of a... It felt like it was for Theon. It didn't feel like it was for the viewer when I saw it. It steeled his nerves. It didn't just steal his nerves, but it gave him a little bit of peace. He knew he was going to die, and it let him know he was at peace at that point in time. This is where it happens.
You didn't think the idiot charge was a little much?
I did, but
another death that I just felt like could have been better. Like, just an idiot charge and just getting, like, quick stabbed. Like, it didn't do it for me in thematically or in an action adventure sense.
Yes, but he's also always proven himself to be an archer, and he's not been really too much of anything else. I don't see him. I guess I don't see what else he was going to do.
Yeah, in that...
We'll just agree to disagree. We can move on.
Sorry to jump in front of you, Nick, but it's like kind of in that situation, what other option does he have? He's out of arrows. He doesn't really have anything else to kind of go. Sorry, go ahead, Nick.
You're good. Yeah, I was gonna say again. I watched the after the episode thing, and they made a specific reference to that too. That he chooses to address his destiny head on and charges rather than wait for his life to conclude on someone else's terms and just like stay the defensive. So again, yeah, I think it's his only option is either to charge forward and hope for the best, knowing it's not going to go well, or just wait for death to finally walk, again, the last 20 feet towards you. I mean, the Night King has come all the way to Winterfell from the north, crashed through the front gates, gotten through the Godswood, and standing right there. It's like, are you really going to just stand there and wait for him to walk the last 20 feet? Or, you know, no pun intended for Theon, grow a pair and go get him. So... Well, I think that the point is that he was going to try and go out on his terms, even if it was going to be quick.
And I just don't, again, I don't see what else he could have done at all in this situation. He's not going to John Wick it. I mean, what else is he going to do?
I don't think they had pencils at this point in time in history.
He's not Baba Yaga.
I had written down a note about that. Theon's death is a complicated thing because, like, I don't know how I can never decide how I feel about that guy, which I think makes him a well-written character. But I honestly just couldn't tell in this scene if Bran is being nice or thinking Theon half-heartedly, or just like being rude for being like, yeah, hey, thanks for dying for me. Like, he just Bran the unfeeling here. Not really necessary. Arya comes along like 2 minutes later. Thanks, Bran. Could have helped stall or something.
Was Bran poorly written or poorly acted, in your opinion?
You can't just throw out poorly written as every option you don't like, Gary.
Yeah, I think Bran was doing it on purpose. I just couldn't tell if he's struggling to connect with people around him. So I honestly couldn't tell if he knew how this was going to end and he was saying he was doing this in order to get that ending, or if he was just honestly being nice to be like, oh, thank you for all that you've done. Honestly, couldn't tell because Bran's a little unfeeling. Though I must say, it is a nice scene. As I hate that he charges in there, but then after that, after Theon goes down, watching the Night King walk over, it's hard for me not to be smug at that point because I know what's about to happen to him and knowing that he's about to be taken out. But I wish it could have happened like 2 or 3 minutes earlier to save Theon.
I can get that. I thought the same thing with Bran. Like, is he saying what he's saying just to perpetuate the future that he can kind of half-heartedly see, so that he knows what's going to happen, so he knows what needs to happen? Like, I need the Night King to die. Theon is currently not going to move out of my way. So do I say, you're a good man, Theon? So Theon charges blindly, feeling bolstered, just so Theon dies, and I bring the Night King closer? Or is he actually still trying to say, you're a good man for what you did to my family? Because by Bran's own admission, I'm not Bran. I'm not anything anymore. Like, so why would he really care what he did to him?
So your question is Bran being a character or a narrator in that point? Is he saying just what he needs to say to
Maybe.
perpetuate the future, or is he saying it as a character within the story?
Maybe. I'm not sure, honestly. I mean, that's probably a point. Is like, is Bran is that he is Bran, but he's not Bran at the same time. So like, they left it kind of unclear, and I think I kind of like it that way because I can't decide if I'm mad at Bran for being like, thanks for being so unfeeling. This guy literally is sacrificing himself for you, or being like, oh, he's barely Bran, and he's saying thank you. How sweet. I don't know. Mixed
He also
feelings.
did preface. Everything you've done has gotten you to where you are right now. So maybe that's more the former, that
Maybe.
everything you've done has brought you to this point, and in this point, I needed you to try and defend me as long as you could by shooting the arrows and killing the walkers you did, so I could live as long as I could, give Arya as much time as possible. I don't know.
He did also tell Theon he was a good man, but like, I don't know. Just wondering. Could have been a real jerk there, knowing, hey, if I say these words, he'll sacrifice himself for me.
Yeah, he could have just turned over and been like, Theon, I no longer need your services. Go die, or something.
And I'll be very honest. When has Bran shown any proclivity to manipulate people's emotions since he's been the three-eyed bro? He's at this point, he's just basically tells people right out, "Hey, do this or we're all gonna die. I'm going to bed, guys. Night." That's kind of his thing.
Right.
He's had a few people sacrifice himself from them now, so either he's like dead to the emotion, or like the three-eyed raven, he's still sorting through his emotions.
Yeah, and even just speaking of Brand, it's kind of nice how he just fucks off for most of this episode and go wargs into some ravens, and then that's all he does.
I had a question on that as well, since we're talking about that. Where the heck did he go? Because at the very end there, when Theon is like doing the last few arrows he has and he's fighting, we see Bran behind him, and Bran still has his eyes rolled over, warging. And it's like, what are you going? Where are you looking at? Where are you in the future? Are you looking at something else? Are you trying to decide? It's like, why wouldn't you be there and be like, Theon, I can see the future. There's two on your right in the dark. Shoot an arrow that way. 12 o'clock. You'll hit this guy. It's like, if I had the foresight, again, and my whole thought was, I don't want to die to the Night King, why wouldn't you be in that? What's more important than being in that moment to try and help those archers, those people around you?
I think he's supposed to be in the ravens, but I don't know why he would need to be in the ravens by that point.
Yeah.
But it's also too kind of the whole
I get that
timeline paradox there, Nick, of like he's if the events that are happening are supposed to happen that way, him saying stuff is not going, to change anything or whatever.
He's the king on the chessboard. He has absolutely no chance of being a effective use in battle, but he is ultimately where all battles move towards.
Ooh.
Strategery, Gary.
Strategery. I just got high concept.
Okay. I want to throw out a point here of, we've talked about the Unsullied here a little bit. Yet again, they prove that they just kind of suck as a fighting force. And this is maybe more of a question aimed at you, Steven, here, just because of the way the Unsullied kind of, to me, somewhat mirror almost Spartan warriors from history of the shield and the spears fighting in the phalanx there. My problem, though, is like the Spartans that I'm most familiar with, obviously, is from the 300 movie, where it's big fucking shields, big fucking spears. And it doesn't seem like the Unsullieds, though, have big shields, though. So, I mean, if you're going to form a phalanx defense strategy, you want a big shield, right?
Yeah.
It depends.
Don't those shields also have spikes on the bottom so you can spike them into the ground?
Some Roman phalanx,
shields,
I would say, are.
Yep.
The big answer here is it depends. You have lancers and you have pikemen throughout history who have had small bucklers on their arms, and large. Hold on, 1 second. Sorry. You have spearmen and lancers throughout history who have just a small bucklers and whatnot. I'd say in the kind of the Greek world, where you have, I will say there's a myth about Spartan warriors. The Spartan warriors are not near as good as we make them out to be, but they would be probably similar-ish to what we would see here. In terms of a little bit more mobile of a force. What we think of, I think what you're thinking of is more of a Macedonian phalanx, and that's where you have just very, very long, large spears jutting out, and that's a little different, I guess, of a formation.
I think that formation, too, was used in Battle of the Bastards by Ramsay's force as they were surrounding Jon.
Yes, they were. And that's where you have more pikemen and more. That's what that would be more of.
They just kind of slowly encroach further and further in with their long pikes, and just you have to squish everybody else in between because you can't get through the pikes to get to the enemy.
It just seemed like, again, like I said, the Unsullied just kind of suck there, basically. Like, again, as we've talked about, their poor placement on the battlefield there, but they're sitting there with their shields, and they just kind of get ran over and don't really put up much of an effort there outside of the walls. And then I think, again, and this is something Gary kind of touched on too, of, later on in the show, they're not really shown much anymore fighting inside the walls of Winterfell.
No, and that's, to my view, like what Gary says, I feel like they're eviscerated outside of the walls. I don't know how they have them going forward in these couple seasons. But I also think that we've touched on this before. Their specific armament is pretty much useless in close quarters combat. They don't have a backup knife or like a gladius or something like that they could use. And that would be that would be something that you would definitely want as a spearman.
Right.
I also think that they strike me as, and you bring up the 300, they strike me as the Persian immortals. And the Persian immortals were named the immortals not because they were some weird, mutated human being that had superpowers and was super thick. The immortals were named the immortals because there were so many of them that you'd kill one and they'd fall, and one would come right back into their ranks, so they would be immortal. They would always, you'd kill one, it'd always be there. And this is what almost strikes me as the Unsullied of being, you just kill one and there's another in the back of them. They're not particularly good fighters, which is not what we've been led to believe, but there's just a lot of them, I guess.
How many do we know off the top of our head how many it was that Dany had purchased and then walked away with from Astapor?
Was it
When they were first introduced? Wasn't it like
8,000?
8,000, 10,000?
Oh, guess what?
Yeah.
It's 8,000.
There you go. See, and again, I know that there's been skirmishes between then and now, like at the battle, and then of course there's the whole Son of the Harpies thing where they were being slaughtered. So they would have gone down in numbers too, but yeah, 8,000 doesn't seem like that huge a number with the scale of the battle of the troops that we're seeing, especially at like the Long Night.
Well, where are all the others? And I feel like I've commented on this before. She's lost her entire army of Unsullied like 4 times now. Like, there was once on the eastern coast, there was once on the western coast, there's now up here. There's just like, how many massacres of these kids can you have until you just don't have any more of them?
See, Gary, that is how you lay out a poor writing concern.
So did
Clearly reference citations, expert examples of when they would have gone bad. It's not just, I thought that they were poorly written, so terrible writing.
Nothing from Gary. He's just speechless here.
I stopped listening to her quite a while ago, and I started trying to Google Gladius.
Yeah, no, I actually saw that.
Silencing the
He said the
haters.
word Gladius, and Gary just looked at the camera, just rolled his eyes.
9.25 out of 10 on Xbox Original.
Oh my god.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. Yeah, I don't know about the Unsullied. I think a lot of it I can get behind the argument that they're poorly used and placed in this particular episode, and so they just get overwhelmed right away. And again, like we all referenced too, like, are these World War Z White Walker zombies? Because that first scene when Brienne screams, "Hold your ground," and we just see them like swarm forward out of the darkness, they're clipping, like they just kind of wash over the Unsullied. And again, if even if you have a well-placed pike like jammed into the ground behind you and you're not going to go anywhere, and something waves over you with a force of that many, like I think Steven said, the crush hazard is there as well. You know, like you're going to get 2 or 3 that are going to get stuck on your spike and you're on your pike, and then beyond that, they're just going to like break or overwhelm you, or just wash right over the top of you, and you're going to get crushed. So, yeah. They needed a short-range weapon to defend themselves, or have the room to defend themselves. Everybody's still, like, in that moment, still standing shoulder to shoulder with the people next to them.
Yeah, getting to what you said.
Get a good movement to swing.
No, getting to what you said, Tyler, I continuously question the effectiveness of the Unsullied as we go through this show. Just, they're made to be these superhuman warriors that can just, they should be just dominating out there. I mean, yeah, maybe they're getting overrun, but they should be dominating, and they are very much not dominating.
Here's a thought to borrow from Gary, conspiracy theory, and this actually being a conspiracy theory. What if it's all just been hype? What if the Unsullied have just been hyped up for years for these people to come in and buy them? They're no more than just common soldiers, maybe slightly better than your average soldier here or there, but they are not this super elite fighting force that everyone has been making them out to be.
I think there's
I'll buy it.
Yeah, I think that's a good chance.
I feel like they just have the same level of training that any highborn would have, and compared to any like low-level militia, they would seem like a very powerful, well-trained force.
Yeah, and I would even say they're slightly maybe even above a highborn here, but not by much, and definitely not to the levels that
they can't screw off. Like they either get good or they get dead.
Exactly.
And I think that the defining trait of an Unsullied, and they even said this before, the defining trait of an Unsullied is how obedient they are. You're able to cut off one of their nipples and they'll just still standing forward. obedience and discipline doesn't necessarily imply skill with a spear. So
True.
Do genitals help?
Uh,
Silence the crowd. Anyway, Nick, you can continue.
Again, too, like in that area of Slaver's Bay where they are trained, that's that part of the world, right? Like they all have these long pikes because they live out in the middle of nowhere. They're going to get attacked or be used in battle in a desert setting. Once they, it's not necessarily like they're being trained in Slaver's Bay for a battle in Westeros in a wooded area or an area where they're meant to be designed for a siege tactic. So maybe it's just that they were never trained. What if they're in this situation? Oh, well, they'd be screwed. It's like, I don't know. Again, yeah, that kind of goes back to what Tyler was saying, that they're touted as the best, but for a very select, limited scope. Anything outside of that, they're just, it's a numbers thing.
I'll be very honest. The one thing that's always struck me also about the Unsullied is just their lack of variety. If you're creating a armed force that you can sell to other forces, they have no archers, they have no spear throwers, they have no cavalry, they have no swords, as we've talked about. They have no variety whatsoever, which makes them very one-sided, and to an extent that would be the case. Again, to go back to ancient Greece, you got a lot of hoplites in ancient Greece, and that's kind of what these guys are. They're kind of hoplites, and that's hoplite is not a big word, but you have a lot of hoplites, but you'd also have light cavalry, you'd have heavy cavalry, you'd have slingers, you'd have archers. At the very least, you'd have slingers, but you don't see any of that, and I don't know. Maybe it is all hype, and maybe it's exactly what you're saying, Tyler, because it doesn't square with what we see. The results do not square with what we've been sold.
Exactly.
I had to Google hoplites, and I feel like it was another very not needed explanation for a heavily armored foot soldier from ancient Greece. That's what Google tells me. You could have just said foot soldier, spear, shield. I don't think you need to have a name for it. Not every type of army needs their foot soldier having a specialized name. That's all I'm saying. Like, just consolidate. They're spearmen.
You'll be blown away by the catapraxis then.
Catapraxis? That sounds like a venereal disease.
So, I want to ask the question here. Does anyone have anything else to kind of talk about the episode that's not dealing with how the episode ends? Go for it, Gary, since you're the first one to answer the bell.
I think Nick mentioned it earlier that he thought that there was a large build in the beginning. I literally wrote down long silence. The episode just starts with like silence and just like a cameraman moving around. I thought that was...
That's because all you are is noise, Gary.
I thought it was an attempt to try to build tension, but I don't think it built tension in the right way. Just long silences seem like... I just imagine going back to the cinema reference of like, how do you want people to watch it? An episode where somebody just switched on their TV and all they get is the HBO, and then you go to like 5 minutes of silence. I don't think that's a proper cinematic experience unless you know ahead of time how your audio needs to be mixed. Tyler? So
I think you're missing the point here, Gary, because again, this goes to the way you view stuff versus I think the way the rest of us might view stuff. It's to build tension, suspense, and terror. It's to show the suspension. Suspension, I think is the word I'm looking for, and terror.
Suspension of disbelief.
No.
So to build suspense.
There, thank you. Suspense.
Okay.
Yep. And terror that basically all of these people are feeling here of like, Sam is like just probably sweating bullets because he's got to go fight, which he is not a fighter. Tyrion is just, quenching his fist and stuff like that and just praying, like thinking about the sheer terror of what's coming. And that terror is the big thing engulfing the entire group right away at the beginning, because here they are facing the largest army in Westeros that is bearing down upon them, and the only way to stop it is their plan is to take out the Night King. They have to survive until they take out the Night King, which involves dealing with hundreds of thousands of this undead army here. And then the fear of just not knowing whether or not they're going to live. So that's kind of what my view of what that first little bit is showing there, as they kind of pan to different characters, is just all of these ranges of emotions kind of washing over everyone as they prepare for what is to come. Nick.
Also, it's not necessarily 5 minutes of silence. There is underscoring music playing the entire time. And you hear Lyanna shouting to troops. You hear people in the background saying, man the wall. You know, somebody hands Sam some obsidian weapons and says, get to post. Like, people are talking. There's music. It's just that there's no, like, big dialogue is the difference there.
I will touch on here too. I'm going to touch on this even more at the end, but the music throughout this episode is fantastic.
I had
if anything else on that long silence,
I'll
just go to my next point.
I had a music on how it's in the depths of what's going on, and you drop the music out a couple times again, like, because they're making a choice to make it as realistically gritty as possible. You don't hear battle music when you're actually like going into a battle, and so like it drops out, but then there's these big swaths of when the dragons fly by on, you know, fire lights up the night, and you see everything, and you hear the big sweeping violin and cello wind music going in the background. But then at the very end too, there's this really nice moment of like all hope is lost, and it cuts out to just like this little underscoring haunting piano melody that's really cool.
Are you saying Fortunate Son was not just playing in the background constantly as people are flying around in helicopters?
Right? Contrary to popular belief.
That's what I'm imagining right now too. Is just fucking swooping in with ear pods in, just like, let's go.
It's Well,
hey. If Apocalypse Now told me anything right, then you do have sometimes you have music as you go and do battle.
I thought he went surfing. He was like, we need to go surfing.
Yeah, but he flies in on the helicopters. Flight of the Valkyries.
Wagner. Classic. All right, go ahead, Gary. What's your next point?
The one thing I did say I really enjoyed was I do believe that the Urikas, the Dothraki weapons, I do actually think that, I'm guessing that was probably a practical effect that all those light on fire. And I say that because as on the rewatch, I looked at the horses, and the horses look scared shitless when the fire starts. Like, you see all these horses, and they're probably trained to stay in place, but when a whole bunch of like small fire explosions go off, the horses don't really know what they're supposed to be doing. They're not really prepared. But yes, I thought that was kind of a cool effect. Kind of worthless in the grand scheme of things, because I think it's just a place mark. It's to give each Dothraki a dot on the map as they go in and get destroyed.
It makes a nice visual there as they ride into the darkness and the fires get extinguished.
It really did. Like, I give them full props for that. It was a neat trick seeing the sword torches go out. I did think it would be even funnier if it didn't mean they were dead. It just that the sword gets a time limit or something. But I did think it was funny. Or it was a cool trick. It was a really nice visual. Like, it did strike that fear into your heart. And then it made you wonder a little bit why they sent the Dothraki out there, because now you don't know what you're facing and you've left your vanguard, but whatever.
And maybe you should have put that fire on the tips of the spears or something instead of, the blades of the horses that are all going to die immediately.
I guess going back to Steven's point of kind of bad battle tactics and the suspension of disbelief, and that is they light all the whatever swords, but if you were actually doing this strategically, you might light their swords, but you wouldn't send them into battle at that point. Like, you would, like, it did not make sense. And that was kind of the bridge point of, 5 minutes of silence, and then we do something stupid, and that's how we start the episode. Anyway,
is it Arak, Arakh is what the
Arak.
weapon is.
Correct.
Okay.
Hmm.
I just didn't know the
Arak.
pronunciation for it, but
Urukai is a type of orc.
That's what I was
My
thinking
random
too.
Orakai, yeah. The random joke I made as I was taking notes was the mist falls and there's a midair collision, and do the dragons need the FAA?
As much as the
I
Dallas
made it.
airport does.
Yeah, I made a note that I felt like, and I'm thinking when I wrote this, that fire magic is used as a MacGuffin was specifically when they lit the trenches. Like lighting the swords is kind of one point where like it's making a visual point, but also lighting the trenches didn't actually make a huge difference in the battle, but it was there to like show that the whites were smart and they can like kind of jump over the fire. Like I didn't think it anyway, I just wrote that as a did the fire do anything other than just expand the plot forward?
What's the MacGuffin again? Does that mean something that's not really needed?
An object
We're
or
like a red
person that
herring?
only exists in a story to move plot forward.
Oh. No, I think it was a good deterrent. Like we talked tactics of how it was used poorly, but it would feasibly be a good way to slow down the momentum of a charge or coming at you to seize your fortress. So I think it was there for a purpose. It's just it did show the not uselessness, but the lack of compassion the Night King has for his own army in just like holding his hand out and saying, "Go kill yourself," so that the 5 people behind you can get over the fire. And just like using his own army to make a bridge for the rest of his troops.
I would say it kind of served almost two purposes simultaneously. Of like as a battle tactical advantage there, yes, that's what it served, but it also then kind of maybe slowed the pacing down a bit for the episode to catch your breath there and everything like that. Like obviously the armies
Yeah.
with inside the castle were regrouping and stuff like that, but then it slowed it down a bit for the show to kind of reset. Okay, this is now where everybody else is at.
Yeah. Speaking of slowing down, I also made a note that I think the Sansa Tyrion conversation, and this is before the dead were reawakened. We just kind of jump to the crypts, and I think there's just kind of a conversation where Tyrion wants to go out and fight, and I kind of noticed that on a rewatch of like I think this is just them trying to hit a reset button so you're not overly desensitized to the battle. Like you need to have some other human interaction. I don't know. Did you guys feel like that was, there was kind of a point where they had to kind of reset you, Tyler?
Yeah.
So this is the part that is mentioned on the inside the episode part of they had different stuff throughout the episode to kind of break away from the battle. Like the library scene, which we haven't touched on, and I don't know if I really even want to touch on it because I think it's just a dumb
I'll
scene,
touch on it.
But I mean, sure. I'll expand on it more, Nick, when Gary brings it up here. But like, from my perspective, I was enjoying just the constant, basically, of just battle. Like I was enjoying that here. When you stop and try not to jump over the library there or anything like that, but like when you stop and show the characters and stuff like that at certain points, yeah, there's a time and a place for that stuff. Like when the fire trench was lit, it's like, okay, regroup, let's go back at it here, whatever. But just the intercutting between what is going on and what it, doesn't help there, because then all of a sudden you come back out and hey, here's Sam laying on the ground crying while there's dead just piling up around everyone, and Jamie and Brienne are back to a wall hacking and slashing away. Go ahead, Steven.
I just like to put an exclamation point on everything you just said. The pacing of this episode is difficult, and it is sprint, walk, sprint, walk, sprint, walk, and I just maybe that's what they were going for, to appeal for the most people. That does not appeal for me. I want to sprint, and then I want to walk for a little bit, maybe, but I don't want to sprint, walk, and just go back, forth. It takes you out of the entire thing. I lose after, when I stopped at the siege of the walls, when the dead take over the walls, the pace just becomes so random at that point that it just takes you out of the nature of what's going on. You don't have the heart pumping fear of oh my god, I'm going to be overrun, but you don't also have the slow creeping terror of trying to escape all these undead, because it's happening at the same time, and your body's just like, all right, so I guess everyone's going to die, whatever, I guess. It plays to the worst aspects of both of those, in my opinion.
If no one else has any balls on the generality, I'll jump to the library, which I, as you've said, like, is a very much a pacing thing, because it went from episode there's very much about a large scale kind of war combat to like a very small scale stealth sort of mission in the library, like very much like a different sort of zombie movie, like from a World War Z to like maybe a Walking Dead or Dawn of the Dead, the new one. I haven't seen the old one. Where they're kind of just creeping around the zombies. And I think it was a very huge tonal shift, because then you go from Arya back to the Hound, and the Hound is outside, and there's like very much fast zombies going on and a siege going on. And then you go to Arya, and it's like she's kind of creeping around in what seems like a much less densely populated area of zombies. It both structural quantity and then also just speed of action is very inconsistent. Tyler?
So yeah, like I had a couple of points written down too about this. Like Arya enters the fight in a big verbose way there of she jumps into, I think even saves somebody, and I could be wrong, or is it she just kind of just jumps in and you see her just slaying zombies up there along the wall after she's done shooting arrows at them. And then the directors touched on this in the after the episode part, is like they thought the pace and tone change was important. And where is it? Like, no, that's another part here I don't want to touch on just yet, but it's just, oh yeah, like, and then all of a sudden Arya backs up and falls down a set of stairs and bumps her head somewhere along the line there too, and then all of a sudden she's now not 100%, which, yeah, I totally get that. You smack your head in the battle, you might be slightly concussed or something like that. But then just like I think Steven touched on, it just kind of grinds everything somewhat to a halt when they now shift to the library, where she has to sneak through the building for some reason here, instead of even using her stealth skills to go take out all of these zombies in there, which and maybe to this thought just kind of came to me as I was thinking about this part here, is maybe this is set up to remind the viewers of Arya's stealth skills, for something that is to possibly come later in the episode, which we are going to get to. But it just seemed like it was kind of a longer drawn out part that then takes you out of the, like the Steven had talked about, the terror, the fear of the battle at hand there, where it's like, who is going to survive this thing? What is going on here? Nick.
First of all, I'm more abstaining from providing an opinion. I'm not a huge gore fan. I'm not a huge, Night of the Living Dead type person anyways. I like
Nick, he invented the internet.
The suspense. Invented the internet. But yeah, like, so when I say I abstain from it, like, what kind of horror do I like better? The answer is none. But different people have different suspense that they get, that does freak them out. Sometimes not knowing and staring off into the darkness and seeing that death come right towards them in this massive big fight is something that freaks people out. But as you all have said, maybe there's those instances too where if you see the dead right by you and someone's trying to sneak through the area without getting seen, maybe that suspense is something that they may have tried to pander more towards a certain audience, just for something different, to try and incorporate more people's opinions.
So it's more of a genre shift. It's a
That's-
horror genre shift.
That's a good way to say it. That's what I kind of saw it as, Gary, because I had that same note from the end of the episode review too, Tyler, that they wanted to try and change it up so it's not just 90 minutes of straight battle and fast cut camera angles, because that may be what some people would like to keep the pace, but that's going to numb people to the human element. If you see, again, my interpretation of something that I'm not a fan of myself, that's my framework. If I see Arya trying to hold her breath and be as quiet as she can with the dead walking right around the corner from her, that I can see is very suspenseful. I can see the actor gets more time to try and act rather than, here's my point, here's my blocking, swing sword, hack this person's head off. I have to act scared. The camera's going to be right in my face. I get a 2-second clip of trying to convey the horror and the fear that I have in this moment. So a different genre, a different type of horror, a different type of scared, rather than just fastly running through the halls. Not trying to defend it, just my understanding from what the commentary was that they wanted to try and break up the shift. I do get that that's hard to go start, stop, start, stop, start, stop. Maybe they could have cut it a little shorter. Maybe it could have been a smaller scene with Arya. Maybe it could have been a smaller scene with the fighting and balanced more between the two different types. But that was a comment they had about how the walls are kind of closing in and you're kind of stuck to the maze of Winterfell, saying rather than the whole courtyard or the whole front entranceway underneath the murder holes of I have this whole wide area to defend, I can only walk down this 1 5-foot corridor and turn left when I get to the end, and who knows what's around the corner. Steven.
I guess I kind of understand that, and I don't know. It just doesn't work for me. It's
which is fair.
I know.
Fine.
The
You're entitled to
anatomy
your
of
preferences.
Oh no. I know. I'm not saying that you're wrong. That's what I'm not trying to do. But the anatomy of Winterfell is so poorly described to the viewer, and just the pacing differences. I don't know how to describe it. Well, it takes me out of the episode after what, although I hated it, don't get me wrong, I watched it as hard as I could because I was interested in the battle. And then we get to this part and I start to lose interest. I remember this because when I first watched this, I was very excited for the battle. And Amanda can attest, I sat down with half a liter of whiskey and a scotch glass, and I finished it pretty quickly towards between the battle itself, and then I just stopped drinking because it was just boring after that.
I have a quick thing, and then Gary, you can go afterwards. You mentioned the layout of Winterfell. That was a question I also had in this particular instance, and we're talking about inside the castle. Why in the hell is it so dark in there? Wouldn't you want to have every candle lit? So because we see here's the thing I wanted you to remind me about earlier, Gary, about sitting in front of the warm hearth and seeing the fireplace.
I regret
lit.
nothing.
Everything was lit. Like they're all walking through the halls of Winterfell. There's torches in the courtyard. There's lights in the candles in the hallway as we see people going through that main, tribunal reception hall in the main hall of Winterfell. And there's lights everywhere. The hearth is going. But then at this point, when people walk through the halls, it's super dark. Like, did the Night King's cold wind blow through and knock out every candle in the whole place? Yeah, exactly. It's like, of course it's going to be terrifying in that situation because it's super dark. And there's no electricity. It's a castle in this time period. And so I had that as a comment, wondering, is that a tactic thing to make it harder for your enemy to see where you're at? The dead can superficially see in the dark, I'd imagine. They'd have dark vision to some extent. So it was just interesting in my mind why it was so dark. Anyways, sorry, go ahead, Gary.
Anyway, I was just gonna wrap this conversation, that specific conversation up. That it's interesting we all sort of noticed the very heavy tonal shift, and none of us seem to really like it. I think somebody said earlier that I think there's some people who would have liked more of the library type scenes, and that's the kind of like that's interesting and good television to them, and other people might like the large scale battle. But it's interesting we all kind of clued in on that it was just a weird start stop. I'm sure the first time I watched it, I probably was just excited because, Game of Thrones was on. But when you rewatch it, it's just like, oh my gosh, this is tedious. It's just a 90 minutes of like, there's something for everyone, but there's also a lot for that people will not like something.
But I think that's an issue is when you have a lot for everyone or something for everyone, you don't actually have an episode which has a point to it. You have just an everything pizza that, hey, I know you don't like, or I know that you like Hawaiian pizza, so we threw some pineapple on here, but we also threw some, ranch, and we also threw some, now it's disgusting. Great.
By serving everyone, you really serve no one.
Yes.
I guess maybe tonally, do you feel like this episode, obviously it's supposed to be a dark episode, but it also just tonally doesn't really even match up with, the Battle of the Bastards, which the Battle of the Bastard has absolutely no breaking point. There's just, Jon gets saved by another army, but there's no, slow down point. Or maybe they cut to another conversation.
Yeah, there is. I feel like there is. There's the hard stop in the middle where all of the Bolton army surrounds them and Jon is dying under the pile of people. There's a hard shift between Jon being saved and Jon gonna die.
It's maybe though more like a pause in the how do I say this, kind of with what we've been talking about here. It's not a shift in genre there like the Battle of Winterfell is, where it goes, terrifying enemies versus sneak through the library, whereas the Battle of the Bastards is just fighting, pause because now they're surrounded in the fighting still.
The tide of the battle changed, but yes, you're still in the same genre. You're still in suspense.
Yes.
Because the battle went to a tipping point, which is that they're surrounded and everyone's slowly getting crushed, and that builds suspense. Whereas, this just switched genres, and it didn't tonally. I think this director directed a couple other episodes, and maybe it's just he's a crazy kook.
Yes.
No.
He's the battle director.
He did Battle of the Bastards. He did Hard Home, and he's done a bunch. Yes. Spoiler alert for House of the Dragons too. So it's not. I'm not going to blame the director completely on this, although some stylistic choices were probably obviously his to make there.
Yeah.
But
I don't mean to be antagonistic because I'm hoping you will change my mind, but I see them as the same. If we say that we don't like the change, just for me, and again, not trying to change you all either, what I am hearing from the message, not trying to hope that you'll change my mind, just what I'm hearing is we didn't like the back and forth in this, but the back and forth in other things is allowing the suspense to build, seeing the different angles of who's involved in that scene.
I guess you compared to the Battle of the Bastards, I didn't really like the crushing part, but as we said, people's preferences, I don't like the idea of being crushed to death. So that was a very uncomfortable scene. And so it went from battle, which is just random, suspension of disbelief, to now I don't have a huge phobia of it, but I could imagine that'd be terrifying to someone who had large fear of confined spaces. That's a very traumatic scene to go through.
Right.
Whereas this just has as a genre shift.
Trying to rope Amanda into the conversation here. She said she's not that concerned with the creeps and the dead, but if it's Lyanna, that kind of makes her skin crawl a little bit. Having something that's different, again, it won't be stellar aces for everyone, but again, we six, as much as we would love to be egotistical about it, we six are not the sole audience to take in Game of Thrones.
Who's the sixth?
Who's the magical sixth person?
The fifth of us, sorry.
Arya.
I've got 6 screens. I've got the little game clip screen on my phone, on my computer still up too for YouTube games or Discord games.
YouTube games 6th.
But like, it's not just for us. So it's like, yeah, it'd be great. Like, even if they designed it so that we all 5 were like, this was an amazing episode. I loved. That's 0.00001% of the audience this is intended for, right? So I get that, but at the same time, I think having something that's an attempt to draw in the scary parts, the horror parts, the suspense parts for different people is what, for me, I appreciated more, even if it's not something that I'm really keen on either, because I'm not a big gore fan. I don't know who's next.
I would just say my thing here is, like, if we want to keep comparing it back to Battle of the Bastards, is Battle of the Bastards didn't leave the genre of fighting there, whereas the Battle of Winterfell went from fighting to then like this quiet sneak through a library thing. So it kind of left the genre of the big battle into a more confined, like much more confined, like focused single person kind of sneaking through, and then it jumps back to large scale combat again here. So that would be my distinction to draw if we were to draw a line in the sand between the two, is Battle of the Bastards never really leaves the large scale combat, whereas the Battle of Winterfell does.
Or I'd be willing to second that and kind of say, almost in video games terms, it's like playing 2 different video games. You're playing one video game, which is a mass battle, and then you're jumping to a second video game, which is a hide and sneak and kill, and but you're jumping to it within the same
the stealth level.
I guess
you're
time.
playing the stealth level.
Yeah, you're playing the stealth level. Yes, but I would also say that. You have to make that choice. You can't have everything appeal to everyone. Any sort of TV show or movie, you can't have them appeal to everyone. I mean, imagine them making Chucky and then going, well, how are we going to appeal to the little kids? Like, maybe you shouldn't be appealing to the little kids with a movie like Chucky. You should have a single or maybe 1 or 2 genres that you're going with, and you should hit on those. If you are a medium, you are trying to tell a story. You're not trying to tell like 18 different things at the same time. You're not going to tell anything. You're trying to tell one story one way, and that's how you're going to get it across. I mean, I'm thinking of all the great movies out there right now. You don't, unless it's like a 3-hour movie and you have time for those tonal changes, and they're long tonal changes, you don't really have them. You have a general tone throughout the entire movie. Even Lord of the Rings, which I think is one that has a couple tonal changes when you're going through it, whether you're being with the hobbits or whether you're being with Boromir. But they're delayed. They're not sharp cuts one to the other to one to the other to one to the other. It takes time. And if you don't give your audience time to do those tonal shifts, and if you have too many tonal shifts, if you're playing an organ out there, you're not going to appeal to anyone.
I've been kind of quiet during this part because, quite honestly, the only part I wrote down about the library was that you'd think in the castle, with a battle raging and a blizzard roaring, it shouldn't be quiet enough in the library. But I don't live in stone walls, so what do I know? I honestly didn't really have much of a problem with this until you guys pointed it out. It was kind of different, but I think I'm cool with it just because it shows a different aspect of different parts of the battle. I honestly think I would have I would have liked to see the episode stretched out into 2 episodes just to show this was the pivotal battle, and I think it could have it ended a little quick for me. But I didn't have a problem with the library scene until, other than the fact that Arya's throwing books on the floor. I mean, how disrespectful is that?
Okay, so maybe my question, as I was thinking about it, dare I like defend the writers? Right after that library scene, do we go back to Jon? Like, we go back to Jon, and then they have the mass raising of the dead, right? And then it goes to the garden.
I think so.
Yeah.
I don't know.
So
They have
maybe
so
that
many
was-
cuts. I don't know where it is.
I was just gonna say, maybe is this to try to slow down the episode, because I guess that mass battle, there's like a dragon battle too. So maybe I was gonna say maybe they're trying to transition with that, but I do think that maybe the problem is that they transitioned to Arya and then they ramped back up. They needed to stay at that pace, or like they made too drastic of moves going back to Jon and the dragons. If they would have just went from like Arya to the Kingswood, maybe it would have been a good transition to like slow us down. I don't know.
Now I remember it. Arya is sneaking out of the library. She slowly closes the door behind her, and we see more walkers break through a door nearby. So she takes off running fast again. And then we cut to the Hound and Beric trying to creep through the castle. And they are hearing something scratch at a nearby door in the dark where they are. And then Arya falls through a door with a walker on top of her. Like she's running from them, and like it's like pushed through a door or something. And then they try and jump over to save her, and that's where that jumps to. That's the transition. Because then that's the scene where then Beric is, like we talked, sacrificed, and Arya and Melisandre and the Hound. Well, the Hound and Arya get into the room. Beric gets into the room then too, dies, and we see Melisandre is there as well.
And Melisandre asks Arya, like, what do we say to the god of death? Thus inspiring her.
Yes.
I did
Exactly.
have a note.
Fucking dumb.
I did have a note right after that.
Callback, Tyler. You can't hate all callbacks.
Well, believe me, let me tell you how much that thing is so.
He's
fucking
just sitting on
stupid.
this rage bomb he's going to drop at the end of this. Go ahead, Amanda.
Yeah, keep
Oh,
going,
I did have a
Amanda.
note right before we went back to Jon. Is like Arya had her little thing in the library and all that jazz, but then there was a quick flash over to the dragons, and Dany says Dracarys and tries to burn the Night King, and we're all like, oh god, look, it doesn't work. But I will give Dany credit. He sits there, he lets himself get burned, and then he starts to pull his spear. And unlike most characters in most movies and in most TV shows that'll sit there and be like, what's he doing? She immediately is like, oh, out. We got to get out now. Like, she doesn't hesitate. She flies away. Whereas it's so common in TV shows and movies to have the characters sit there and think about it and watch it and then wait to see if the spear's actually going to, like, come towards them maybe. And in the last minute be like, should we leave? Like, she just goes. And I love that lack of hesitation where I just feel like that's missing in a lot of shows. She shows something else near the end, too, where she does that. Would I write that down? Yeah, later on when she's on the ground and, like in terrible danger and Jorah's fighting people, like she grabs a sword and she helps too. Like she doesn't just, she obviously has no skill, but she actually, like when she sees an opportunity, does actually do something with it.
Speaking of the Night King, I also wrote down that he has a magical parachute. Like he somehow got from the air to the ground, and they just like, ta-da!
No. He doesn't, there's no fall damage for him, that's all.
He did a superhero landing. That's the other thing I figured. He just did a superhero landing and made like a giant asteroid crater. Yes.
He full on like just free falls without like trying to spin around or land on his feet like a cat. He just like falls off into the darkness behind the dragon.
What was your guys' opinion as we're on dragon time? Did you feel like the dragon battle was very good? I thought it was reminding me of Transformers. Lots of motion, way too close to the camera, very blurry, and really added nothing to me.
At the risk of spoiling the other House of Your Dragon, I liked how they did their scenes in there better, where I could kind of understand what was happening. This one, I agree with you. I saw dragons flying. I had no clue who was who. And yes, chaos is to be expected, but like, as the viewer, I have no understanding and appreciation of what's going on. So yes, Gary, chalk that up on your board. I agree with you.
I haven't written any down to this episode.
Yeah, it was a little hard to understand. Like there were moments where like you can see the dragon is trying to bite sideways at Jon on the back of He's riding the green one, Rhaegal. And so it's
Did
like
Rhaegal
trying to
get
blow
injured?
blue fire. They both got injured. I saw at one point Viserion is biting and scratching hard at Jon's dragon because Rhaegal kind of like crashes to the ground and Jon tucks and rolls off when he comes down to the ground. That's how Jon gets down to the ground to try and do the charge at the Night King. But also Drogon is scratching and biting the heck out of Viserion, the Night King's rebirth dragon, because you see at the end, like later in this episode, Viserion has like half a jaw at the very end when he's getting ready to fight, blow blue fire at Jon in the courtyard.
Okay,
I thought at first
I
it was
saw
just.
something.
I thought at first that like the dragon was just, undead and zombified, but like he's missing half a jaw.
Okay,
And
I
he's
thought I
like
saw
all
a jaw.
scratched up. There's a part where Drogon is fighting and biting at the undead dragon, and the undead dragon I think like gets his part of his cheek tore out too, because there's a couple times where like the blue dragon is getting ready to blow fire, and you can see it like birthing in his side of his face as well as what's coming out the front, just because he's been battle damaged. I did have an interesting note as a random tieback, probably not meant to be a tieback, but Drogon beats up Viserion just like Drogo took out Viserys.
Oh, good catch.
Probably not meant to be a tieback, but Rhaegal was getting his butt kicked because Rhaegar dies. But Rhaegal, the dragon with Jon, was getting tore up from the Night King's attack, and then Drogon comes in and bites the crap out of Viserion, and that's when the Night King falls. And I was like, oh, that's a cool alliteration. Probably didn't mean to, but that's how I saw it.
Oh, I could see it. I mean, I don't think it's a coincidence that it's Viserion, the one name for her brother who completely
The fallen dragon.
Yeah, I mean, he wasn't a good brother. He basically became her enemy. He was violent, abusive. Like I don't think it's coincidental that dragon who was her friend and her ally who then became her enemy and was trying to attack her.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that's a coincidence either, so I could see that.
So I had that.
I'm sure that there's probably a very large narrative that they attempted to write for the dragons and their interactions based on their names that no one saw. Like which one bites at her or like whatever.
Everyone
at
was
the
all
very
way
end there. When Daenerys is mourning Jorah, Drogon comes and lands on the ground next to her. Like, is he just resting and tired, or is he mourning with her? Is he comforting her? Who knows?
I saw mourning comforting.
Yeah, I saw it more as like comforting.
I saw it a little bit of I saw a little bit of comforting, but I've seen, who knows? I mean, Drogon, if so, it's the first time Drogon's ever shown any kind of concern.
Well, he's always been the one who's
Mm-hmm.
been. I mean, obviously he wasn't ever locked up with the other two, but it's always been kind of portrayed as Drogon is the one with more of a connection to Dany than the other
Mhm.
two.
But
Right.
he's also taken off and flown off and burned little kids and eaten them, so.
Tis also true.
Can't be caged. Can't be caged. I think those are Miley Cyrus lyrics. Anyway.
Here we are introducing Miley Cyrus to this podcast continuum.
My last, yeah, I don't know why you're surprised. My last random note is, it's bothered me before, but does anyone else think that I don't think that the Night King is a practical effect. I think it is excessively digital, and I think he looks, especially on the dragon, he looks very, very cartoony.
Really?
He's very blurry,
Is there a time?
and he's very cartoony on the dragon.
I would say maybe more for the scenes of riding the dragon, it might be a little bit more heavily digitized than it would be when he's on the ground. When he's on the ground, it's definitely a guy with a makeup
yeah.
and a suit on.
Oh,
I remember them
Probably
showing.
Well,
I remember them showing like all the things about how dressed up he had to get every single time he got into this thing. Like it was a significant amount of effort.
I thought they made a
It-
big
they
production
did,
of
so.
trying to do very little CGI in this episode, and I thought they did a pretty good job with that, honestly. They did a lot
They
of
have
real
an
life
actual animatronic buck that they had them pretend to fly the dragons on that made them move. So there are a couple like strafing shots and side shots where it's an actor sitting on a mechanicalized bull essentially that they can tilt, move, rotate a little bit to make it look like this person's on something, and then I'm sure
And with
digitized to make it
visual
look like the
effects,
blue
they
screen of
blend the
dragon.
foreground and the background.
Blend it. So yeah, like Tyler said, it's probably back and forth a little bit, but trying to make it more the person.
I don't know.
You need
I
a better
don't
TV.
find
like Tyler
I don't
should have started
find the
different.
Night King. Yeah, I need a better TV. I don't find the Night King as of that intimidating based on his makeup or anything. I think they could have done more.
What?
What? I don't know. Everybody's the right for your opinion. Yours is wrong.
No, your opinion is
Tyler.
wrong.
Gary's nightmares don't include the Night King.
I will say, like, I like the Night King look from Hard Home more than I like this one, because this one is like
It's different actors, yeah.
Yeah, in Hard Home though too, it's definitely more of like a glassy, frozen ice look to him, whereas in this one it's more of just like a frosted, bluish look to him to kind of bring him more in line with the other White Walkers there. I much preferred the Hard Home look a little bit more, but
I will agree with Tyler. I just think he was better at Hard Home.
Again, it's preference, right? What terrifies you may not terrify somebody else, and vice versa. Like, obviously, we're getting to that culmination of the Night King in this episode. So when we first hear about him, he's this ambiguous person with blue eyes that you can see like from the distance, through the shadow. It's like it's more terrifying. Being able to see and categorize and distinguish and determine reduces some of that fear that some people probably have about it. So it might not be as terrifying to you seeing how he looks.
That was my last note about this whole episode, was that the Night King did not fulfill my hopes.
he didn't.
Someone else gets to lead the rest of the episode.
I'm glad you said hopes. I thought you were going to say fantasy for a second there.
All right. Does anyone have anything else we want to
Deviant
touch
art
on
doesn't fulfill my deviant art. Nick.
before the final part?
Deviant art.
Only thing
I just had a couple quick notes. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say the only thing I want to bring up real quick is that not enough people die. Not enough main characters die. By far. For real. For a fight of this stature, for a fight of this size, for a show that prides itself on killing people, we have one A character die and a handful of B characters die, and that's it.
Go for it, Nick. What are your final touching points?
I have a couple little ones here. I'll just kind of go through in order as I was writing them. A couple of them set up that final conversation, and so you can roll your eyes. But Melisandre says that there's no need to execute her. She'll be dead before the dawn when she first comes up to
Davos.
Sir Davos, and then she stares at Arya. That's like, you're here, or is it like, I knew you would be here because you're supposed to be here again? Just like this little foreshadowing, setting up. Maybe she can see the future type stuff. I don't know. But then I wrote down the flashback conversation where she says, "You'll close many eyes." Brown eyes, green eyes, blue eyes. I wrote that down because I remembered she said something about it, but I couldn't remember what it was. And then that was actually brought back up as dialogue later in this episode as well.
Tyler very much rolled his eyes when you said that line.
Oh, I know. That's why I'm not looking up. I'm just like going through my notes. I know he is. Again, it's all subjective. It's not this is right, this is wrong. It is one person's opinion. And you can disagree with it. That's what the world is all about.
I also noted the weird interaction between the Red Woman and Arya, and I'm wondering, could it be a realization because she's never had a real good pulse on who's gonna be the savior of the world, and is it that she's having a realization that out of all my guesses, she's here, maybe she's the one to save the world, maybe it's Beric Dondarrion. Maybe it's the Hound.
Gary, I'll throw you a huge lifeline because you always take so much crap. I'll agree with you on that note, and everybody's been throwing out all these lovely Lord of the Rings references, which I adore. But to your taste, good sir, I'll throw out a Star Wars reference and say Yoda always comments about always in motion the future is. So it could very well be perhaps that Melisandre sees something about someone's going to take out the Night King at this event, or if I can hold out or help out by making fire or making the Dothraki more intense, I can give them just maybe that much more hope that maybe this savior, maybe this person, maybe this someone out of nowhere that nobody suspects or thinks should be the person to make the move, will get a chance to make the move. And so maybe that's what she's, like you just said, having this realization, like, I see death in your eyes, or something of that nature. Because again, when I wrote down that note, like, I couldn't remember, and I didn't have the time to go back and search what that episode was. But it's in the Brotherhood Without Banners when Melisandre buys Gendry from them, but she sees Arya there with the Hound, and she just like is suddenly taken aback at Arya's there. Not that she knows her, but just like stares into Arya's eyes. And at that time, Arya isn't that intimidating. She hasn't been to Bravos. She's not, one of the House of Black and White's initiates. She's just a gal. I think she's got Needle at that point. So she's been through like the Bravosi training with the dude, the water dance training. But she's just like staring in her eyes going, I see death in your eyes. And is Arya someone who's supposed to be intimidating at that point? Or that's just some throwaway line that they had put in from 6 years earlier? Who knows? But I'd written down that note about you're going to close many eyes or something to that effect. We went through a lot of my notes. I'm just trying to get to it. Had several comments about manning the walls. Why the hell didn't they not do that sooner? So kudos to you, Stephen. There's the scene. I had a couple scenes, comments with Arya, where when she does hop onto the walls, when she's manning the walls, and she does start slicing through people going to town, she's got like a pole arm pike type thing with like obsidian on the end, because she's slicing and they're just dropping left and right. Remember, that's the weapon that she had asked specifically for Gendry to make. We never saw or knew what that weapon was going to be. She just like laid out a piece of paper and said, I want you to make me this. And he's like, what do you want a weapon for? You're my lady, or whatever. He like brushes her off, and she's like, no, make it. Like, again, she wanted that weapon with obsidian, but also she wanted a pole arm. I wrote down a little throwback because of her hand-to-hand bow staff training with the waif. And I was like,
do we not see it in the previous episode? I thought we see it in the.
That's the first time she whips that I noticed it, anyways.
Does she prove herself with the bow staff? And I don't remember how she proves it to Gendry. What weapon she had?
She throws some knives at a wall, I think.
Oh, okay.
She proves her prowess as well by throwing the knives. That was something I also had down. Was again, I felt my own subjectiveness. I was more involved in the library scene because it shows the tonal shift in that particular character, or maybe just Maisie Williams' acting. Because before the battle, she's all, I know death. Death has many faces. I'm interested in seeing this one. As she's throwing the knives, kind of all cocky with Gendry, about she's not really scared of what death looks like. And she's asking John, somebody? Or maybe, no, she's asking Gendry, what are they like? What are the White Walkers like? How do they move? And he's just like, they're death. Like, there is no way to describe it. It's pure terrifying. And then she doesn't really seem to be that scared about it, but then in this library scene, you see that realization where she realizes how terrifying that may be, and she's more scared about it. So, to me, I took more away from that scene because I had that dichotomy between her characters. We talked about that. Oh, yeah, okay, so then in the little reception area, then after Beric dies and Melisandre's in the main hall with them, she talks with them and says, I told you would close eyes, and she says, brown eyes, green eyes, and then there's a distinct beat pause, and blue eyes. And I wrote down brown eyes, Merrick Trant? Question mark? He had brown eyes, right?
I'm sure one of the people at the the twins had brown eyes. Sure, one of them did.
Well, that too, right? Right. Again, I'm just trying to think of like the main people of like who, because again, I don't know. I'll be the first to say it's subjective. Maybe I'm giving more credit than credit's actually there for. But it just seems like, why say that? If you have if you have X billion dollars to make on if you have an X billion dollar budget to write whatever you wanted to, and at this point in this episode, given free reign to come up with whatever storyline you wanted, why not just say you will close many eyes? Why specifically pick brown? Why not say green? Or why not say hazel? Or this and that? So I was attributing names of who these people might have been.
I'll defer to the book people, but is it possibility as it's written in the book, she's like, she stabbed him and he closed his green eyes, like the book would specifically call out someone's eye color as part of the narrative, because George R.R. Martin is very much someone who likes to over-explain, like, setting, especially the naughty scenes. Kind of
throw this out as well, it's their basic colors as well, like, you don't have to think of like hazel eyes. What is that really? When you say brown, blue, green, brown, blue, green eyes.
Again, that just If
at least she didn't say purple eyes, then you'd wonder.
Ooh.
Right. So again, purple being the original Valerians of what they're meant to be, to Gary's book comment. So no, I couldn't think of who had green eyes. I don't know. Maybe she meant the waif. I couldn't remember what the actress who played the waif's eye color were. But I thought that was really interesting.
I could see it being Maren Trant, Walder Frey, and then the Night King, but it's definitely double meaning. Like, it's definitely got layers of meaning to it.
Sure.
It stands for all the eyes and yet specific ones.
That could be. And we talked about the Crips. Theon's a good man. Yep, I had Lyanna as the comment on the person in the crypt. So last little note, and then I'm at the end. So then you can go, Shotzi. So John, I think you made a comment about this too. I think it might have been you, Tyler. But like, Sam is like being buried alive by the dead. Because there's like John lands, he makes it into the castle, and it's like he goes, I have to get to after Dany and Drogon to save him from all the true res walkers. And he's like, I have to get to Bran, and they're like, go, and he makes it into the castle. And there's like a distinct beat where he comes in, he looks, and he sees Gendry and Tormund fighting, but like overwhelmed, and he makes a distinct thought of, I gotta ignore it and keep going. And he looks over and he sees Sam like literally being drowned by dead. How Sam is not dead, I'll give you that one. But he makes the thought, no, I have to get to Bran, and abandons Sam. And I had that down as a beat of like, damn, that's cold. But I mean, in the greater scheme of things, you get why. But yeah, that like, shows the most important thing I have to do is this. And I just thought that was really interesting to show that beat, rather than just like the hero charges and he reaches the Godswood. It's like it's showing how everything else is sacrificed for the one common thought. And then then Theon dies.
I honestly wish that had consequences, though. That it's kind of undone by the fact that it doesn't have any consequences. Those people that he abandons survive, and maybe that's
even wants it to be a Telltale video game where if you choose one direction, someone dies.
I do, but I also just want Sam to be dead.
One of these people.
I just also want
Sam so much.
I don't hate Sam, but
he's a character.
No. I don't hate Sam. I actually enjoy Sam, but he has no right surviving this. No right at all to survive.
What about Pod for King?
Pod for King.
Pod's a badass. What are you talking about?
Pod should have died too. Pod should have died.
Bring it on.
I might be a little bit on Gary's side in that one.
Pod should not. No.
He is a well-trained squire But he's just learned in like the
Pod
last
would kick
6
anyone's
months?
ass in a one-on-one fight. You don't even know. You know
Even
who didn't
Lyanna
know?
Mormont?
You know who didn't know? Those prostitutes. They didn't know, and then Pod showed them. Mic drop. Mic drop.
Do we even see Pod in this episode?
No, I don't
Maybe
think
in the
so.
beginning when he's
Do you?
holding ground with Brienne, right?
He's standing next to Brienne, and then at the end, when they're backed up against the wall, he's sitting there fighting, I think, next to Brienne and Jamie. Or he's in
Okay.
Okay,
there with maybe Tormont or something like that. But you do see him.
gotcha.
All right.
Gotcha. All right, so I'm up to the end. If anybody else has anything else, otherwise we can jump into the hate. Let it flow through you.
Let it flow.
Okay. So I will start off with including a part from the inside the episode part with the two directors where they talk about for 3 years they had known that Arya was going to be the one to kill the Night King.
I had that too.
And then I'm going to now transition over to a line that George has said there, and I'm going to paraphrase it because I don't know it exactly here, but it's basically like if you're writing a story and you set it up throughout the entire story that the butler did it, like you're writing a murder mystery and you're setting it up the entire time that the butler did it, then all of a sudden at the end you swerve and said the mailman did it or something like that. That is not good storytelling. The entire show that has been dealt with the White Walkers has been set up to basically be this is Jon's story. Jon has more history beyond that or whatever, being that he's actually a Targaryen and everything like that. And he's the true Song of Ice and Fire and everything like that. But the entire storyline for the White Walkers has been Jon's to deal with. Arya only comes in the past couple of seasons and not even really involved with much of the White Walker planning, but Arya has just kind of come in here at the end. I'm not mad that it is Arya who takes it out. I am just mad that the way it happens to be Arya, to be the one taking out the Night King here, that makes no logical sense. Obviously, they rope it in here with some stupid throwaway line they said here way back season 3 or whatever by Melisandre, where it's like brown eyes, green eyes, blue eyes, wink, wink, wink. And then she also talks about...
I'm not mad, but some stupid throwaway lines.
It's stupid.
That's what. All right, real quick before we move on, that's what my finger up was up for. Is you're not mad. You're just big mad. You're big mad right now.
Like it maybe ties into larger stuff with her character, like some of the other people who are living that are part of her list as part of the people who would fall into those categories. But the blue eyes of the White Walkers does not apply. It's just a stupid way to kind of tie it. It's like, oh, the White Walkers have blue eyes. Oh, hey, Arya could be the one to kill the Night's King and save the world here when she really had nothing to do with this story at all. And also, too, like, I like it's a little fan servicey that Melisandre throws in there. What do we say to the God of Death? Not today. Which, you can also then, I guess, if you want to make the slight connection that they have always kind of then also referred to as the Night's King as also death. So he is kind of the literal embodiment of death in the world here. But the entire ending to this is it just makes no sense that the story they were telling and set up, it doesn't make sense that it is Arya as the one to strike the final blow there to end the battle here. I'm not saying it should have been some grand, drawn-out sword fight between Jon and the Night's King, although that would have been very cool to see, because then we get to see just how much of a badass the Night King is in combat. We get to see Jon's skills put on display there and stuff like that, and everything. And even like Amanda, like I totally agree. Like stretching it out of like this could have almost been like an Avengers Infinity War, Avengers Endgame situation where it literally the episode ends with almost all hope being lost for the side of the living, and then it picks up the next episode with them overcoming it or whatever. I don't know. It just the whole fact that Arya is the one to kind of strike the killing blow, it doesn't make sense. It feels like to me for the story that they were setting up here. Gary.
I'm always confused as to like what's the assumption of how she gets from where she was into like striking range of the Night King. Is that she's like up in a tower? Like she's like third floor, like
Stealth.
John McClane diving over to like stab him.
Stealth.
Yeah, it's another great thing.
Or
They
she
just don't set
sneak
it up.
past all of his guards, or how does she do this?
The only thing they show us is the one wisp of hair move on one of the White Walkers as she magics over there. That's all they show. And then she's suddenly in the air.
Screaming while she's jumping at the Night's King too. An assassin
Why do they
jumping through
always
the air,
scream?
screaming.
Why do they always scream?
Why?
Oh.
Asking the non sequitur, just the question. If it comes out that this was George R.R. Martin's thought, or he propagated it to the writers, right, wrong, or otherwise, that doesn't bother me. Would you have a different opinion about it?
Probably not, but at the same time, though, with the book, you would have a more drawn out kind of point A to point B to point C with the books. Like I keep harping on with the show is we're in such a sprint to get to the end with the show that any setup that they could have used to even better justify it being Arya to do the final kill is completely thrown out the window as they just, like I said, race to the end.
I completely agree with you, Tyler. Like, it depends entirely on what the information the books gives us. Like, sorry, Steven, I know I'm completely skipping you, but you'll have your chance to disagree in a moment. Having all that information in there, it's completely different. Like, maybe the book is going to follow that, and the book, unlike the movie, will have the chance to go longer and have more time to build it. They can give us more details that would be exhausting to put all into a show. Go ahead, Steven.
I'll be honest, my issue with this scene isn't that it's Arya that kills him. I don't care that it's Arya that kills him. I don't care if it's Jon that kills him. I care that the Night King went out like, and I will cuss here, the Night King went out like a bitch. It was just the worst. He is built up to be the ultra super penultimate super villain, and here comes Arya swinging in, I'm assuming on a rope like Indiana Jones, and just stabs him by with
Steven,
some little clever what?
Penultimate villain or ultimate villain?
Oh.
I assumed that he was going. I assumed he was going to be the ultimate villain in this show, but him dying halfway through the last season makes him truly a penultimate villain, which I guess that's a record scratch.
So, and I get that, but my problem there is that just he can be a sub boss, whatever. If that's really what you want to do, I think it cheapens the plot, but you can do that. That being said, I think that you should have some sort of fight. If you're going to give us this major, massive battle where you're going to stretch out everything while you're going to show us Arya sneaking through a library and fail at siege tactics at the same time, at least give me a battle like what Tyler said. Show me what the Night King can do. I want to see him fight. I want to see him go one. I do. I want to see him go one-on-one with Jon. And you know what? During that fight, I want Arya to swoop in there, and I want it to be 2-on-1. And Arya can land that final hit if she really wants to, but I want that to be I want to be awed by the fight. I want this to be something where I'm sitting there after that going, holy crap, that was a fight. Not just, holy crap, did he just go out like that? Is that really what they're doing? Did I miss something?
Also, the lieutenants didn't do much this episode either.
The lieutenants never do much.
They're there to look
If I was them,
strong.
I don't like doing much either, but
They're just there to look like you have backup.
Yeah.
Night King, he's stuck doing all this on his own.
They're the backup dancers.
Tyler, you commented that you were watching some of the after the episode stuff too, and I don't remember watching this, or if I had seen it originally, I do not remember it. And this is only the second time that I've seen this scene. But they mentioned in the end of the episode, the Night King was stabbed in such a way that it was meant to, again, whether it was conveyed the way we wanted it to be or not, aside, the reason he was stabbed in such a way was because it was reminiscent of how he was originally turned into the Night King. and they made that comment that the stab in the stomach from a single blow is the way that he is undone because it is the way in which he was created by the children of the forest. I agree. Having a big, a big drawn out battle showing the exposition of how it would have been the blockbuster culmination of 8 seasons worth of battle and intrigue. I mean, the episode again is 90 minutes. We've gotten 60 minutes of him, antagonizing the characters already. We haven't seen the hand-to-hand prowess of him. Maybe he doesn't have hand-to-hand prowess. Maybe he is more dangerous in his power. Yeah, maybe his magical power or prowess. I mean, he's standing one-on-one against Jon out in the front of the castle. That's the time to have that battle. And instead, he chooses, here's my numbers, raises everybody, and then just walks away from Jon.
Because he doesn't care about... No, because he doesn't... And I will stop that right there, because he doesn't care about Jon. Jon's insignificant to him. The only thing that matters is a three-eyed raven.
So why would he try to have a big battle with Jon before going after the three-eyed raven?
Because you can stop him at the three-eyed raven.
I guess I don't reconcile the two conversations there. Jon is not worth his time, but we want to see a big battle with Jon.
Jon can defend. Jon can defend Bran, and that's how you get that major battle.
Yeah, you still have the raising of the dead out in the field and everything like that. But after Theon dies, the last stand is Jon versus the Night King in the Godswood there to basically stop the Night King from killing Bran. I think that's where Steven's trying to go with that.
If you want to really emphasize it, what you could do is you could contrast that with Theon's charge, which was so inept and immediate, kill. And the Night King does justify that with a breaking of the lance and stabbing it through him. Maybe Jon does something similar, and we're expecting, Jon's going to get fucked up too. But Jon just reposts, and the Night King has to go, oh shit, this is real. And then you get a fight.
Interesting.
So, are you done? Nick, I don't want to jump in front of you there.
I was just going to say, you're good. I agree with what Steven said. It doesn't bother me so much that Arya did the killing. I think it would have been interesting to see a more involved battle at the end than how he goes down. And again, to have the stab be the stab, that I like how it's like poetry, it rhymes. But to see the... I guess I'm just at that. And I've had this conversation a couple times too about the whole when we talked about of Game of Thrones. It's a conclusion. It's not the conclusion I would have liked to have seen, but I appreciate that this arc was resolved. And again, I don't know if I'm not the best fan for being as involved into it, because I know a lot of people. This is what our own very distinguished member of the audience, Gary Delaney, said. This is where everything went south, and the whole hopes of whatever for the audience went down the crapper. There are people who are invested in it, that just because what I wanted to see didn't happen, this is all garbage. And I guess I disagree with that in the sense that I think it's still interesting to see how he's dispatched, even if it is a crappy way for him to go down. It's interesting to see how it happens, I guess. To you, Tyler.
So yeah, I will echo. I know, Nick, you and I had multiple conversations about the show here throughout the years and stuff. One thing to kind of call back to like an earlier part of our podcasting here, when we talked about our thoughts on these final 2 seasons, I had always thought that it would be really nice of again, I think I've talked about this in our recording too as well, of the White Walker threat to me was always the biggest threat of the show, and that became even more apparent as the later seasons rode on. So when you end it 3 episodes into the final, or essentially in 1 episode of the final season, it's kind of an afterthought to what this whole thing was all about. And I had even talked back before too, of I thought it would be really cool if they did season 7 and season 8 kind of dealing with one of the major threats. So season 7, had it gone this way, would have been maybe more dealing with the White Walker threat, and then season 8 is dealing with Cersei. Or my also other thought was they lose the Battle of Winterfell, have to retreat south, and deal with Cersei kind of, and like all this all kind of happens in season 7, and then season 8 is the grand threat of dealing with the White Walkers. But then too, I also wanted to kind of call out some more stuff that was said on the inside the episode part from the two writers. They talked about how Arya wasn't the best candidate, or was the best candidate if you weren't thinking about her in that moment. That's dumb. Hopefully you forgot about Arya at the time. Also dumb. And Jon didn't seem right for this moment. They wanted to avoid the expected. It's like, again, goes back to that paraphrase comment I made from George of like, if you're setting up the entire storyline to revolve around in the murder mystery example, the butler doing it, and then all of a sudden you switch at the end, the last few pages, the mailman really did it. The buildup has been just for fucking nothing then. You have basically wasted my time to all of a sudden swerve me at the end just because you think a swerve would be cool. Steven.
We keep referencing what the director said, and my thought really is, at what point do we just admit that the directors didn't know exactly what they were doing in this episode? I firmly believe that they maybe had a vision. I think it was a bad vision, and I think that most people agree that it was a bad vision, and I think that it could have been done much better. I think that what we get from them are, honestly, at this point, excuses. And if you want to tie up I'm actually not against the, flipping it at the very end. It can be done okay. This wasn't done okay. It comes down to the ideas that they're saying they can be good ideas if they're done well. They weren't done well. So why are we deferring to them and go, well, this is what the directors really wanted, so what we need to see is from their point of view. I don't need to see from their point of view. They need to make a good movie for me to watch as a viewer, not knowing exactly what they're saying or what they're thinking at the time. I'm not going to pretend that I am the most insightful viewer. I'm also not going to pretend that I am completely oblivious when I watch movies or shows. I am probably about average. If you make a show that honestly feels like it appeals to either, it's like that one graph where you have the big what is it, hyperbolic graph on top, the bell curve, where everyone's at the 100%, everyone's near the 100%. If you make a show that only the top 100% or the bottom 100% can appreciate because it's so arcane and asinine what you're trying to put out that the 75% of America can't understand what you're trying to do, you did it wrong. I don't care what your vision was. You did it wrong.
Just for the record, for the listeners to this, and I'm sure you guys know this already, I'm now in no way defending the directors with my comments. I'm just kind of calling out this is what they were saying there at the end of the episode. I know you guys know that. I just wanted to call that out for the listeners as well.
And I'm not saying, and I want to be very clear. I'm not saying that against you either, Nick. I'm just saying, like, we keep bringing up the directors, and I think the directors messed up. I think they're wrong. I think whatever they say, whatever opinions they give, it was wrong. It's like it's like trying to, I don't know, defend the Vietnam. It's like McNamara trying to defend the Vietnam invasion, right? I don't care what he has to say. It was wrong. So,
if you have
it wasn't an invasion.
Sorry. If you have a clarification,
no.
Gary, go ahead.
Clarification, you guys keep saying director. Do you mean showrunners?
Whatever
the
they
showrunners are who are in the after the episode.
Writers.
The directors.
The showrunners, okay. Yes.
That was all my clarification. Continue, Tyler.
And this will definitely come when we do our wrap-up episode for the show here. George is not completely without blame for this, because for the first 4 seasons and, little bits and pieces afterwards, the showrunners did an amazing job adapting these large books basically into watchable television that people could watch, understand, and follow along with. It's when they started running out of book material and realizing some of the choices they had made early on of excluding characters, combining stories together, and everything like that, they start running into this issue where they are just going off the rails into complete territory that of just doesn't make sense logically for the show that we have been shown for X amount of time beforehand. All right.
I don't know. The end, yeah. In conclusion, this ending was very disappointing, incredibly disappointing.
Yes, for
Man.
7.5 seasons of buildup of the existential threat to the known world here to get wiped out without any grand battle or anything like that. It's just like, okay,
Without a grand battle, 90 minutes.
Without a show of force of what the ultimate bad guy can do. We are just kind of...
He raised everybody back from the dead. What?
Yeah, he's actually the hero. He raised everyone back from the dead. Now they can live forever.
I hear my inner lawyer trying to attorney these conversations, because I keep wanting to be like, objection, speculation, objection, leading the audience. Like, at a certain point, subjective interpretation has to be acknowledged. And everybody's doing a really good job of that. But when the final takeaway is, so ultimately this was a really terrible, terrible ending, it's like, objection, subjective conversation. It's like, you can say, this was terrible for me. I thought this ending sucked. I thought this was bad. But when we say, this was wrong, this was a terrible ending to this episode, that is not true.
Well, I mean, we are saying...
I don't agree.
We are saying you're... I mean, yes. In a way, like, when I'm saying this is terrible, I'm saying, like, I'm under the assumed assumption here that it is me saying, I think this is terrible. You can look at it from and I hate sometimes people who get real nitty gritty with the critiquing of stuff here. And I'm like, people who are like high and mighty of like, oh, I'm a film critic and stuff like that. Sometimes of like, I don't understand what the hell you're talking about when you're saying the acting is bad, because unless it's like some of those Nicolas Cage movies where you're like, dude, what the hell is that accent or something like that? It's like, I don't think a lot of
Nicolas
acting
Cage
is bad.
is the saint.
But again, it's I'm not saying this thing completely ruined the entire 7.5 seasons of build-up. Like, because of the way this ended, like the previous 7.5 seasons worth of build-up are completely terrible. No, it's just the build-up was such a the conclusion point was such a letdown here, or whatever, that you're just kind of like, man, this could have ended a whole lot better than what it did. Gary.
So you're just saying the conclusion to that story arc,
yes,
of the White Walkers was disappointing.
Yes. It was
I have a different conspiracy theory, and that is we needed more Tyrion Lannister, or needed more Sansa in this episode.
for them to stick him with the pointy end.
Yes.
All right. Oh, and also too, the it's called the Night King's theme. I think it's called the Night King or whatever. It's basically the theme music that you had mentioned, Nick, that starts playing when the Night King starts making a slow descent into the Godswood there. I think that is absolutely fantastic music, because it is eerily chilling and creepy. The piano is playing and stuff like that, and that slight key and everything like that is fantastic.
You mentioned how the showrunners, as Gary distinguished, had the comment about they didn't think it should have been Jon. And I wrote down that they used the word "it seemed" a couple times, like seemingly that it would have been Jon, or that they chose Arya because they hoped that it was something different or whatever. But I agree with those comments that it seemed like it was a choice that they made, not that it was something that they were supposed to have it be this person. It seemed like it was something that they had determined. And again, yeah, I had that same note that they had thought maybe for a couple of years it was going to be Arya. So maybe something that Steven may have more understanding with, but like a role-playing game, if you have an idea in your head of how you want to end a campaign, how you get there becomes very jumbled if you have to stretch it out over multiple sessions.
You start railroading. Yeah.
Exactly. So there, and I'm again, good for the goose, good for the gander. There's lots of subjective interpretation that I felt like, ooh, that's how that happened, or ooh, I like how that happened. That might be different than the opinions that you all had and the takeaways of how we got from A to B, A to Z in this case. But it was different, 100% agreeable for me. Me personally, I just don't get behind it was wrong. It was bad. It was poor. It wasn't as great as I was hoping it would have been. But again, for me, a conclusion is better than if it was prolonged, perhaps.
I don't like any idioms that involve geese. My personal opinion.
You are an idiom, Gary.
Also, conspiracy theory. Would it have been a better or worse twist if it was Tyrion jumping for the stab or Sansa jumping for the stab?
How is that
again? Motion to strike, subjective.
Conspiracy theory, Gary.
Well, you were saying that though in the showrunner's opinion, it was important that you weren't thinking of Arya in that moment. If Sansa or Tyrion came up, you weren't probably thinking of them either. They would have been a complete 180 of like who is going to do it. Like, you're not going to expect Tyrion. He's been in the crypt the entire episode, but he's had the itch that he wanted to get out and fight. I think Tyrion could have killed the Night King.
That goes back to like what Tyler was saying, though, is that like they had thought some people might have forgotten about Arya. No, some people probably were thinking of them. So to say it might have been Sansa or Tyrion, there are probably some people out there who love this show so much and they only watch it for Peter Dinklage, and they're always thinking that he's maybe going to come out and do something crazy. So,
but honestly, on the theory of like you've forgotten about them, there's a lot of main characters that we talked about that should have died that you forgot about. Like it could have been any of the characters that hypothetically should have died. It could have been his brother, the Kingslayer. That would have been a notable turn for his character arc, that he's the one who kills the Night King. I just think that there was other people who could have, it would have been meaningful no matter who does it. So, Tyler?
So number one, random theory is there's also the theory that Jaime is actually the Azor High prophecy there. But I won't even bother getting into that one there because I don't quite understand that.
Jaime is or Jon is?
Jaime is.
Oh. I guess I didn't remember that. I thought it was always that Jon was.
Number two is if it's anyone else other than Jon, it goes back to, again, my point from George there of like you've set it up to be this person for so long. And Stephen, I would like agree with you to a point there that, you can do a last minute swerve correctly and make it impactful, but that's not what they did here. So it would just kind of, if it had been anyone else, Gary, it would just fall in the same category for me as it being Arya still being wrong. Amanda.
I can see both points. Honestly, it didn't really occur to me. It did seem strange and random at first glance through this episode, but I initially didn't have a problem with it. Just put it down to the vagaries of chaos of battle. But it is a good point that you've been building up to this point for so long. I will argue that Game of Thrones will build up all sorts of people, like in the first season when they built up Ned Stark as this perfect protagonist, who, guess what, that didn't work out. But, Stephen, I do want you to remember when you sit there and say, well, if they build... What?
Said she's got a finger man, look out.
Yeah, specifically, if you build someone up and up, and then all of a sudden it's too quick a turnaround for you, I would remind you of that for something else yet to come. But I just needed more details, and I can get, you don't really want to remember her at that point, but I don't know. I hope the books have more details for it. I wasn't disappointed by it, though.
Remember the 5th of November. Gunpowder something and
Treason and
something
plot.
something.
I know of
Treasonous
no
plot.
reason
How
why
can you
gunpowder
forget
treason
after saying
should never
don't forget?
be forgot.
Are we
Don't
just trying to
start him,
throw in
Gary.
like all the pop culture references?
I just
into
wanted
the
to throw in a
single
V for Vendetta reference. Sorry, everyone. I'm just trying to.
Who watches The Watchmen? There we go. There's another one for you.
There we are.
All right. So I will ask the question: does anyone have anything further they'd like to discuss, or are we good to kind of take her on into the home stretch?
What do you think happens in the next episode? I don't remember. Like at the whole rest of the season, I know vaguely where it ends.
Well,
Does
we'll have-
anyone actually? I think some of you have watched ahead, but
I don't think I'm spoiling anything, and feel free to cut it if I do. But I think they bury the dead. There's a moment of mourning because we did lose many people in this episode. Not as many as obviously we thought that we may have. I think that we bury some of the dead.
I guess Gary will have to find out when we do our next episode recording here of what happens in the next episode.
Yay!
All right. So I think that'll then wrap it up for us here for this recording. I want to thank everyone for joining along in this episode here. This is going to be quite a long one to edit at some point in time.
Have fun
Sucks
with
to
that.
be you.
Sucks for you.
For next time, though, we will be watching Season 8, Episode 4, The Last of the Starks.
Man, oh man, we are getting close here. There's
Yeah.
Last of the Starks, the Bells, and Iron Throne, and then that's it.
That's it.
we're really that close.
We are getting
Yeah.
close. There are 3
For,
hours of story left to tell. 3 hours of story
for-
left to
Goodness
tell.
sakes.
Yeah, well, for I guess perspective, Amanda was still pregnant when we started this. Well, when we got her into this, I should say.
Yeah.
And now we have a 1-year-old.
Goodness.
All right. Well, we'll save some of that reflecting for later on in these episodes as we record on. But thank you, everybody, for listening, and we hope you have a good one.
Bye. Have a good day, everybody. Bye bye.
Peace.